Joint Committee in just a second, but we want to take one of the items on the Rules and Elections, Committee report. We do have a quorum of the Rules and Elections Committee. Myself and Mr. Wesson are here. So if we can please convene that meeting, and we'd like to take up item number 4 first, the billboard tax ballot measure. Well, there was a couple of them. One was a Rosendahl motion. Mr. Wesson had already also made a motion during our budget deliberations, and I'd like to defer to him first on this issue. Mr. Wesson.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President and Chair of this committee. I want to applaud everyone who tried to work within the rules and regs to try to come up with a way to help the city generate additional funds. And I think that given the framework that they had to work with, that they did a very good job. But things have changed, laws are changing, and I just have a feeling that we can do better. And so I would suggest that we send this back to maybe the CLA with the CAO so that we can continue to talk about it. And I hope to have a series of meetings with interested parties and see if we can come up with something. So if you're okay with that, Mr. President, I think that we should send this to the appropriate place for review.
All righty. Well, we will refer this to obviously, if there's any measure, we will retain that here. If there's any ballot measure for rules and elections, just because of what this committee oversees. But on the substance of the motion, if it's something potentially it's not a ballot measure or a different discussion, we'll also co-refer this over to Plum. And Mr. Reyes, I know, has been looking at the issue as well. So with that, I know we have a lot of speaker cards. Do any of the folks still want to speak with the tabling and referral? I see some no's. Any yes?
No,
raise your hand.
if they do that, then, Mr. President, let's vote.
So the threat, to be clear, from Mr. Wesson is we will. All right. I see a lot of waves, but no. Yes, please, I have to speak. All right. So such will be the order on number 4. With that, why don't we co-convene the joint meeting? We'll come back. I know folks are here for some of the other ones. For rules and elections, we do have the oil extraction fee, the medical marijuana cultivation tax, the marijuana business license ballot measure, the library funding ballot measure, community plan update ballot measure, and civilian employment provisions, which we continued from last week. We will be getting to those, but I think I can comfortably estimate that you can take at least a half hour before we get there, possibly longer, and we'll co-convene the joint meeting as well. So, Madam Co-Chair, if you'd like to, do you have a quorum as well?
No.
Okay.
Let's see.
Should we?
Mr. Krikorian is here. We have, how many members do we have here from Energy and Environment? Just the 2 of us. Okay. Well,
Do you want me to continue the other ones, or you want to?
go ahead and try. Yeah, give it a
Okay,
little
all
more time.
right. Well, for anybody who just left the room, come back. It's not going to be a full half hour. We'll take some of the other items while we're waiting a third member of Energy and Environment, and then we'll take that. So, Mr. CLA, if you'll walk us through number 5, please.
Certainly. Number 5 is a consideration of motion Han Krikorian relative to placing a tax on the March 2011 ballot on oil extraction fees. I believe that the CAO has staff here to report.
All righty. Come on forward. Mr. CLA, CAO, it was a joint report, right? Oh, there's no report. I know the maker of the motion is Ms. Hahn, and she is expected here. Is any of her staff here? Would she like us to wait?
Okay. Mr. Alarcon's going to step in here in a minute.
Okay. Well, it looks like we're about to get quorum.
Which item? Ed?
On the medical marijuana items on 6 and 7, I think there was some discussion that it might be best to wait and see what the outcome of Proposition 19 is. I know that's a bit of a risk in terms of whether there will be a May ballot or not, but Mr. CLA, did you want to chime in on it? Anything about those two?
Hello. Yeah.
Hello.
Yes, you could do that to find out what happens with Prop 19. Essentially, what's before you is it would be a cultivation fee or tax under the structure of our medical marijuana ordinance. Now, if it is legalized, obviously, how it's distributed and that whole process is going to change, and you might look at an excise tax or sales tax or some other fashion on that. So right now, the only thing that you could consider would be tax on medical marijuana, on plant cultivation.
Okay. And we couldn't, if it doesn't pass, we couldn't, the way the current medical marijuana law exists, it's just a collective model right now, not a business model, so we couldn't necessarily put a business tax on that, correct?
Correct. It wouldn't be a tax on receipts. There is no sales per se. It would be a fee to cultivate plants, and would be one of those recoverable fees when the medicinal marijuana is distributed to the collective.
So we have the maker of the motion on 5, 6, and 7, Ms. Hahn, with us. We have a full Rules and Elections Committee. Ms. Hahn, we were just discussing these, and we would love to hear your input on these three. Oil extraction fee and then the medical marijuana cultivation tax. The CLA had said on 6 and 7 two different recommendations. The CLA report.
Where is the oil extraction?
The oil tax is number 5.
See it?
Number 5.
Well, I just thought this was an opportunity to raise some money in the city of Los Angeles. I know initially I thought it would bring in more than I think the report shows, but I know Long Beach brings in, I think, about $6 million annually on oil extraction. And again, we're one of a handful of cities that I think have an opportunity to do it that doesn't do it currently, and I think I think the voters should decide whether or not they think that's a good idea to put an oil extraction tax on companies extracting oil from the city of Los Angeles. They take this oil, they don't pay anything, and yet they reap billions of dollars in profits last time I checked. So we're looking for a way to raise revenue in the city of Los Angeles. We don't always want to hit the taxpayer to raise revenue. This seemed like a missed opportunity, in my opinion, that we haven't had. So that's the reason I did it. Do we know how many surrounding cities have oil extraction tax?
Mr. CEO or Mr. CEO?
I'm waiting for my staff person to come down on this
Okay.
on this particular issue. If you
oil
wouldn't mind
experts.
giving me 5 minutes for them to come down.
I might want to jump a bit to the end here. I think
Sure.
part of the concern would be really, you've got a number of items before you, a few taxes, a whole bunch of other items. One of the concerns would be how many items are ultimately on the ballot and what the revenue opportunities are. If this were the only tax going forward on the ballot, so I guess what I'm suggesting is you could send it forward for drafting and then decide ultimately what ends up going on the ballot. If there aren't a whole bunch of competing taxes, you may want to move forward with this. The concern would be moving forward with something that didn't generate a lot of revenues that might cause others to fail.
Okay, we're kind of jumping around.
How many, at this point, how many tax measures do we have going on our March ballot?
At the moment, it doesn't look like much, because before the committee got here, the billboard tax was
Right.
referred back to committee.
So what are you referring to?
Well, there was the billboard tax, the marijuana tax, there was this.
Well, the billboard tax, no.
Is no, the marijuana taxes are no.
Phone for you.
I don't believe, actually, that there are any other.
So you're
Staff can help.
concerned that there's going to be...
Now that I think about it.
So you're
I think
concerned
that-
there'd be too many on there, is not really a concern?
Well, as I said, it doesn't sound like it. It doesn't
Okay.
sound like the council's going to put
Okay.
them on, so.
Okay. Yeah, I would move that we draft this and move it forward and let the voters of Los Angeles decide whether or not we should charge oil companies a tax to extract oil from within the ground of the city of Los Angeles.
Okay, we do have two public speaker cards. Maya Zutler, if you'd like to come forward, and then Noel Weiss. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Maya Zutler on behalf of VICA, the Valley Industry and Commerce Association. We're here on behalf of VICA to oppose the proposal to place this measure on the March 2011 municipal ballot. We are opposed to an oil extraction fee because we oppose taxing one specific industry. This is a kind of tax that will be passed on to consumers. In addition, we are opposed because we feel that in this economic climate, it is not the right time nor the right thing to do to raise taxes or fees on business. We should instead be focusing on finding ways to support business and improve the business climate here in the city, not tax business. Finally, you should consider that by continuing to add ballot measure after ballot measure on the March 2011 ballot, it will increase the cost of the election and it will lead to greater voter fatigue. Therefore, we are asking that you oppose this proposal before you today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Would you like to clarify that the more items we put on a ballot, that increases the cost?
Yeah, Mr. Seeley, is there an increase, is there an incremental cost? If we're already doing the ballot, what is, and it's a city-run election, is there?
Oh, he says no.
Minimal, if anything. City clerk has testified that they're budgeted for a number, 5, 6, 7 items on the ballot.
Okay.
There would be a slight incremental cost above that, so it's minimal.
But not, okay.
Okay, thank you. Noel Weiss?
Thank you. I think tax is a great idea. I don't think there will ever be a time when business advocates for greater taxes. For those who have a problem with this, I think we need to look. I don't know about, hopefully the bureaucracy can tell you what other cities have it, but the great socialist Sarah Palin presided over probably one of the more socialistic institutions of our country, which is the fact that every citizen of Alaska gets a check off of the top of every drop of oil that's mined in Alaska.
That's
in fact, her high poll ratings were the result of the fact that she campaigned and got elected on. In fact, she's going to raise, and she did. She raised that. This is something, we have a lot of serious issues in this city. We have issues with tenants. We have issues with possibly a need for rent subsidy. We have an issue with need for mom and pops to basically survive a very tough economy. We have issues with foreclosures, people losing their homes, a loss of the middle class. The funds coming from this can provide a source of, if you will, redistribution or subsidy, and you subsidize businesses, so how about subsidizing small businesses? And in the course of that effort, there will be a debate by the City Council on what the policies of the city really should be with regard to a housing policy, with regard to a transportation policy, and specifically, again, I think putting this on the ballot and getting it passed, and again, we're not talking about an amount, but hopefully that'll be debated during the course of the discussion, we can get to the point where we have decent alternatives that kind of result in an overlap being found between renters, between tenants, between homeowners, and trying to alleviate some of the pressure that Mr. Weston in particular feels from the business community over this rent control problem and over the tenants. And the solution, frankly, is this kind of a revenue source that would hopefully, again, smooth out the rough edges for the people. So all in all, I think it's a good idea, and hopefully the council will put it on the ballot. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You know, can I ask if it's appropriate at this point to talk about designating these revenues to a particular?
It changes the threshold from a 50% to a 2/3 vote if you do dedicate it to something specific, but one could.
That's right. I knew that because Measure A.
Right.
Which is, yeah, so if a designated tax actually takes a higher threshold
Yeah.
Yes.
than one that goes straight to the general fund, which is interesting.
It is.
Yes.
You'd think that
be the
people
opposite.
would rather you be accountable when it came to the general fund than when you said to voters, we will specifically use this money in this
I
way.
think they knew people would be more open to it, and so it was a way of
Yeah.
double protection against any
Yeah.
higher taxes.
Okay,
Okay.
never
Shall we
mind.
keep as is?
I'm mum
Okay.
on
All
where
right,
that
let's
money
go
is
ahead
going.
then and direct that there be a drafting
Richard's here.
of this
Thank you.
on the oil extraction fee, and we'll
Right.
move that forward. Do you want to briefly do marijuana?
Yeah.
Or do you wanna- Let's just knock out.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
Let's do marijuana.
Yes. So we talked a little bit about that. Ms. Hahn, do you want to chime in on number 6 or 7?
You know, again, this was an idea that I felt been talking about since, you know, we had such an increase in medical marijuana clinics in Los Angeles. At one point, I think we were up to 400. We've now certainly scaled that down. We're getting a better handle on the number of medical marijuana clinics, but I still felt like we should be able to see some revenue from that in the way of a tax. And I think Prop 19, whether it passes or not, I still think this is important that we, you know, put this on the ballot and see if people would like to tax these marijuana medical marijuana clinics. Maybe we can talk about how this would work.
Yeah, maybe you can go over the
Sure.
legal issues or the city attorney in terms of what we could or could
Right.
not do.
Well, again, there are no, and city attorney can certainly assist if they like. Under the city's ordinance, of course, they're all nonprofits. There is no sales per se, so we can't establish a tax on revenue. So the proposal would be to establish a plant cultivation fee. And we have worked with city attorney on developing that. Now, relative to the issue of Prop 19, which came up, Ms. Hahn, before you arrived, again, you can instruct to go ahead and draft and then see what happens on the election. If Prop 19 does pass, it would, of course, completely change the game, and we would have to figure out then precisely how we would do an excise tax or business tax or sales tax related to that. But the one that we believe most appropriate would be a plant cultivation fee.
So you're recommending a $500 per plant?
Again, a maximum. The council would set that within that. And again, that's it's nearly impossible to come up with a good number. Some of the because
And explain to me again why we can't tax the actual medical marijuana clinic.
because they're not making any money. They're all nonprofits, so there wouldn't be a business tax under the ordinance. They cannot make money.
I see. And how would we go about implementing a per plant tax?
They would have to pay the fee, and then they would get a tag that would go around the plant like you see in nurseries, so that when there were audits, you could see that the collective had in fact paid the fee, and that was a permitted plant.
Is this on the honor system? They would tell us how many plants they have? Or do we have to
No.
go check back bedrooms and things like that?
Well, this is going to have to be part of the whole process on implementing and enforcing the ordinance, which, of course, all of this is subject to audit and inspection. The ordinance requires that the collectives cultivate their own marijuana. So there is a mechanism there for getting access to what they're using to provide to the patients.
How many plants do we think are out there?
Again, that's impossible to know, since this is an illegal...
What do we think?
Well, we do know that what we've been able to see is the value of plants. We've seen figures up to $8,000 per plant at the grower level. And then, of course, beyond that, whatever it takes to actually, get the marijuana to the patient. So how much it actually costs is very hard to determine. With a maximum of 500, it appears that it would certainly be far less expensive because, again, the collective can only pass through their actual costs. They can't make a profit. So they could pass through the $500 to the patients, and they could pass through the rents and other administrative things, their actual costs. So even at the 500 level, it would appear that it would be much less expensive than what's currently happening now. But again, since this is an illegal crop, it's just not possible for us to get auditable numbers. What would need to happen when it's implemented is to gather data and determine, again, what the appropriate level is, and, so there's a lot of information gathering that's going to occur. So the $500 level per plant, we think, is a top-level number that should suffice.
Do we have any of that information on the clinics that we have, quote, authorized in the city of Los Angeles under our ordinance?
Well, again, I don't believe that we do. Again, we've authorized them, but they haven't been subject to inspection. The actual ordinance hasn't been there. The whole rules of the game changed substantially, so that the mechanism wasn't in place. Building and safety didn't have the fee to do the inspections.
And is this how the other cities are doing it? Long Beach, Oakland? Are they doing it on per plant?
I believe so, and my staff did the research.
I didn't understand Oakland's to be like that.
Well, Oakland just approved an actual sort of an industrial cultivation. So their system now is very different than what ours looks like.
They have it's a tax on their gross receipts.
John Wickham with the CLA's office.
Yeah.
In Oakland, it's an $18 per 1,000 in gross receipts.
Right.
The November ballot in Oakland actually has a measure to increase that to $100 per 1,000 in gross receipts.
Right. How can they do a gross receipts when
Their
their clinics are the same as ours in terms of
It's the difference
nonprofit?
between the legal interpretations of how the laws are being implemented. Their city attorneys have a different opinion than ours. And our ordinance is different than theirs in that implementation. So the taxing rules are different, and so the base is going to be different.
Does anybody tax on the plants?
There are some stories that there's a city on the north coast that taxes on the plants, and we've been trying to track that down. I haven't been able to find the details on it yet.
I mean, all these agencies that have city measures on marijuana, are any of them on the plants that I'm holding in my hand?
Yeah, there's these on this chart, no. The one unique way, it's a proposal in the city of Long Beach, is to tax on the square footage of the growing area, which is a different way to go. That's an easier way to measure, but again,
Do we, if we put this on the ballot, do we have to have language that says how we're going to tax it?
yes. The voters need to know what the basis of the tax is, and
And this is are you telling me this is the only way we can do it in Los Angeles based on our city attorney?
yes.
Per plant?
At this point, this is the only idea that's come forward that doesn't get into strange issues of if you're going to charge it by the members of the collectives, then you're getting information, personal information that would be of concern. If you're going to charge it on, we can't charge it on the gross receipts because of the way the ordinance is structured. There are no businesses and there are no gross receipts. So really, it's come down to this question of finding a way to tag the plants and charge a tax for the plant.
What about a business license tax?
They're not businesses under our ordinance.
So we're really going to have little tags, like you put around a pigeon, and you're going to tag their plants.
It's like, in some nightclubs, they use a tag that they put around somebody's wrist to determine whether they're...
I've never gone to a nightclub. I wouldn't know what you're talking about.
In order to take the tag off, you must rip it. And so I
can never get it off the next day.
So...
okay.
That's
it
a technical
seems really
issue.
labor intensive, this method.
That would be it'd be the responsibility of the growers. On the city side of things, the growers would come in, they would pay the tax, they would receive.
They would say, I have
100 plants,
100
give me
plants.
100 tags, and they pay for 100 tags. They are then responsible to go back, place the tags on their plants, and during an audit or an inspection, if the tag is not planted, then that's not properly taxed and it needs to be corrected.
Okay.
We do have cards on this. Do you want to hit those real quick? Okay, and then, again, we'll be going to DWP shortly on this. Sarah Armstrong is our first speaker, then Don Duncan.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sarah Armstrong. I'm the founding member of the working group that the city convened to help write its medical marijuana ordinance. Today, I'm here to ask you to delay your vote and to investigate further what can and cannot be done. We are, in fact, the 187. We are, in fact, nonprofit organizations. We are terribly stressed economically as it is. We pay a full federal tax with no deductions. We pay state tax. We pay BOE taxes. I know you don't see much of that, and I believe that we should pay something to compensate the city at this desperate time. But I think that we really need to stop and take a look, because if Prop 19 passes, it will be a whole new landscape for you if you choose to allow pot shops in your jurisdictions. In point of fact, recreational use accounts between $10 and $15 billion a year in California, depending on who you talk to. Medical marijuana doesn't even come close to those numbers. I would ask that you wait until the city has stopped its litigation against us, until you have had an opportunity to close the rogues down, which would increase our situation to the point where we could contribute meaningfully. But if you rush ahead now, you will further injure people who have already been terribly injured, and in part these injuries are due to the fact that the city of Los Angeles was hit by so many rogues and so much litigation, much of which we are not responsible for, and certainly we're not responsible for the rogues. If you would just wait until after the election and see where you're at, it would be such a great gift to the medical marijuana patients of this city who so depend on us and will continue to depend on us because, of course, it will take quite a while to set up these Prop 19 shops, as you must pass your own ordinance on that as well. So please, I am begging you, delay today. Don't do this. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Duncan. After that will be Dj Cote.
Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Don Duncan, a resident of Los Angeles and the California Director of Americans for Safe Access. I have some written comments for you today that I'd like to distribute to the committee members.
Just give it to the Sergeant at Arms. He'll take it from him. Thank you.
I'm here today also to ask you for a delay in this decision. The controversy that we seem to be having about taxation is because the report is understandably based on a faulty interpretation of law from the City Attorney's Office, the same faulty interpretation of law that I spoke to you about when we were debating the ordinance. And the reason we have such a strange ordinance is because most people do not consider the collectives and cooperatives, the money that changes hands, to be a simple reimbursement. In fact, other cities and counties that tax medical cannabis cultivation base it on gross receipts. Now, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you consider those gross receipts to be donations, sales, or I guess as our ordinance says, contributions and reimbursements. The fact is there's a dollar amount that should be reflected on a tax return and in the business records of the organization. And so we could enforce a revenue solution for medical cannabis based on the gross receipts or reimbursements of the organization. It certainly is possible. That's what the Board of Equalization does, and it's what other cities do. So I hope you'll explore that more ordinary way of enforcing a tax provision on medical cannabis. The plant-based process, I think, is going to be very difficult to implement and almost impossible to police. However, I would also like to remind you that medical cannabis is already subject to sales tax in the state of California. Here in Los Angeles, that's 9.75%. We don't need a lot of extra taxes on this, and so I want to ask you to be reasonable, because these taxes do not come from wealthy multi-million-dollar cannabis dealers. They come from patients, and at the end of the day, every tax you put on medical cannabis is coming out of the pockets of the sick and dying Angelinos who are using medical cannabis lawfully. So when you're looking for revenue solutions, be very careful about medical cannabis. Thank you.
Can I just ask you something? Because I know, you want to stay there? I'm just going to ask you something. Because I know when I worked with the working group, there was a sense that there was a huge willingness to help the city and pay tax. I heard from everyone in the working group of medical cannabis owners and operators. They did not have a problem with the tax. And in fact, they said, we want to be a part of the city family. We know this is controversial, but we don't mind being taxed. Which way would you suggest? Which do you think is the most reasonable, safe, not burdensome tax model?
I think that,
any of the other cities that are doing it you would recommend we look at?
I think the simplest and the most common way to tax medical cannabis is on a business license tax assessed on a percentage of gross sales. And while we're certainly willing to pay our fair share to make this work, I know that for purposes of political expediency, that's going to be necessary. I would only ask that you be very reasonable and compassionate in this. And if you want to do something different with Proposition 19 or with other tax measures, that's fine. But remember, this money is coming from the pockets of people who can ill afford to be overly taxed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Cote. After that will be Noel Weiss. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, council members. Dj Cote, Central Hollywood. At this time, this is an appalling motion. I've never seen a legislative body work so hard to push patients into the black market. First, the council passes what the media calls the worst medical cannabis ordinance in our state. Then you sue the group of collectives you purportedly were trying to protect, costing each of them tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees apiece. And then the estimated cost to move into compliant quarters under this faulty ordinance is going to cost collectives anywhere between $150,000 and $500,000. The list can go on and on. but now without any expert knowledge of cannabis botany or how to produce medical grade cannabis, yield cannabis, canopy, indoor, outdoor, indica, sativa, you're trying to profit again off the backs of the patients. I spoke with several members of the Board of Equalization today, and they stated they are unaware of any tax being charged by any local municipality on the cultivation of any individual agricultural product. Since all the local taxes go through the BOE before they disperse to the cities, I thought they would probably know about this. You would be well advised to please do the following. Table this motion immediately. Please don't tax the patients. Create and seat a medical cannabis advisory board before this year is out. Repair this dysfunctional ordinance now. Please don't wait for the sunset. Put an end to the lawsuits and revisit this idea in the future after you've cleaned up this other mess. The saying that two wrongs don't make a right could not be more accurate here. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Noel Weiss is our next speaker. After that is Norman Welch.
I too thought that the medical marijuana advocates were more pro-tax than they are. I think a little bit of cognitive dissonance would be appropriately applied here. I think if the ordinance that you passed was wrong, then align this with a gross receipts ordinance that's put on the ballot. You can put an ordinance as well as a charter amendment on the ballot. You should do that. We need to have a public consensus coming from the vote of the people. There's too much special interest going on here. Behind closed doors, outside of the public view. I think a good public debate on this would be appropriate. Let the voters basically be heard. Put an ordinance along with this that does do a gross receipts tax. And when this is debated before the full council, bring John Russo down from Oakland and have him explain to you how and why the Oakland law works and why it would be a good model for Los Angeles. And those that disagree, after hearing what Mr. Russo has to say, can voice their objections. We can have what is a rarity in City Council, which is really a good old-fashioned debate and discussion, and then a vote, and hopefully even out of that, the public will be better educated on what the alternatives are. I think, and regardless of what Proposition 19 does or does not do, we have a net positive that basically comes out of that experience. So for that reason alone, I think it would merit moving forward, whether it's cultivation or not, that seems a little ephemeral. The gross receipts seems obviously more logical, and the council really needs to revisit in light of what the city attorney is doing, and obviously it does matter who the city attorney is. So that's why I think a debate between Mr. Russo and Mr. Tutanich on this issue before the council in this context, I think would be a very educational experience for not just the council, but for the citizens as a whole, and probably would attract a lot of viewers to Channel 35. Thank you.
It's all about ratings. Thank you very much. That will be our second last speaker. Mr. Welch is our last.
Hi there. First of all, I want to say how good I feel about Councilmember Hahn. I feel that she's been a friend to us as patients, and that's why I hope I'm not being presumptuous in my optimism today that this is going to work out. I have a good feeling that that this thing will be tabled because as friend, Facebook friend, and advocate for us, I think Ms. Hahn has not heard the whole story and realizes that now. Because I concur, of course, with everything that all the previous people have just said, that it just needs to be tabled for a while so that you can hear really all the facts from expert people, perhaps a working group that can input this thing so when the numbers will make sense and be more fair where everyone's in agreement. So I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank
That's
you.
our last public comment speaker. Thank you. Is on?
Well, I got to tell you, at this point, I don't feel comfortable having them draft a ballot measure that talks about taxing the plants. I just don't think we've thought that out. For instance, if the plants were outside of the city of LA, what if people are, not everybody is growing it on premise. Is that true?
Well, excuse me, again, the collectives would have to make available their source of the marijuana that they're distributing. So if it's out of LA, if it's
they're not allowed to do that. They
Santa
have to have
Clarita.
they're supposed to be on the premise.
Well, it is, yes, it is supposed to be on the premises.
Right.
That is true.
And again, you can't tell me at all what this will generate?
I'm sorry, we can't. There is just no way of giving you any reliable estimate on the amount.
Do we have a sense of how much gross receipts is yielding?
The 186, they had gross receipts of about $30 million, but that's not broken down in terms of the plant material versus paraphernalia or other materials that are sold in conjunction with it. So we don't know how much of the $30 million is actually marijuana.
But it's gross receipts.
It's the total gross receipts.
And there are other measures on the ballot for other cities that talk about gross receipts.
Yeah, but that was data from prior to the passage of the ordinance. So how that changes in the way that the 186 are dealt with, it's a difficult.
Right. Well, I'll tell you what. Why don't we table this, and we still have a little bit of time.
Okay.
And I think I'd like to get a little more information and try to craft something that I think would be more successful, because I think people are going to vote actually for this. I think most people are going to say, should medical marijuana clinics pay some sort of tax? I think you're going to have the public that want to do that. I know we're not going to be unfair or burden the patients, but I think you're going to get public support for this idea. I bet every one of these passes in every other city. So what I want to make sure we put one on the ballot that is the best written and the most easily implemented. And I just am not clear on how well we're going to be able to implement the idea of counting plants.
Well, again, we're happy to look at it.
Yeah.
And again, until
And if we have to change our ordinance, so be it.
That would be the key to doing gross receipts.
Well, we can certainly put that on the ballot as well and see what the voters of Los Angeles want our ordinance to look like.
I do want Ann just to consider on timing. For a general tax, we have March and we have May of next year
Right.
if there is a runoff.
Right.
The next opportunity for a general tax will be March of 2013.
Okay. Good to know.
Okay.
All right.
So we'll continue it here
Okay.
for now? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So ordered. Mr. Parks is here. We are going to take up 1 and 2, but I know you're here to give comments on 3 and 8. If you'd like to give those comments, we won't vote on those yet, but we'd love to hear your thoughts wherever you want, from here, there, anywhere. And then we'll go to numbers 1 and 2 on the Joint Committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. So we're going to start with number 3.
Thank you, Mr. Parks.
Start with number 3.
Sounds good.
Okay. Thank you very much. I would just like to comment on this issue of providing our Bureau of Engineering another alternative in how to deliver projects. I think we've had a number of circumstances where we go out to bid, we get a design, then we go out to bid, and then we have the construction, and often the change orders because people can't quite build what was designed. And we see now there's a transition going to design build where the same company has to now bring forth not only the design but the construction. It's generally believed that it will give even more of ability to reduce change orders. Certainly you have to be cognizant of getting the best contractor up front because otherwise it could go astray early on. And we've seen this happen at MTA. We've seen it at dealing with Expo Line. We've seen it on small projects in the city. And I think that the issue that we're looking for also is we have, I think, hurt ourselves in the past by everything being the lowest bid. And in fact, there are other elements in deciding on what's the most effective bid that might be a few dollars more, but you get a better product. And so we wanted to provide an alternative to what we have. We found out since we made the motion that we can do it by ordinance based on the CLA's report. But what we want to also make sure is that on page 3 of their document, they identify at least 2 other issues that we need to work on to make this work, and that's dealing with the area of the best value selection, that we want to make sure that generally the process agrees that the best method of procuring a design bill is to provide the city the ability to balance the qualification of the very proposers and the quality of the engineering. So there's a couple of items on paragraph 2 of page 3 and paragraph 4 that we want to include, that we also bring them into that ordinance so that we clean up other parts of the system and we just don't have a new alternative and not an ability for procurement and other things that may be of help. And so we're pleased to see that it does not require a charter amendment, but it's something that I believe is well past its time to bring the city into a new era to how we deliver projects. I think this will also help us when we get ARA money that we have to spend within a certain timeline, that we do not have to go out for 2 RFPs and the delay of our internal process before we can get to the construction. The other thing I think it would be important, in addition to basically ensuring that we have the right contractor, is that we also need to make sure that that all of the things that the city requires on its, whether it's dealing with the contract compliance, all of those issues need to be part of the original RFP so that the contractor can respond to all of them rather than find out about them piecemeal. And so these are the kinds of things I think that would help our overall construction projects.
Okay. Thank you. If you want to, why don't we turn to number 8, if you want to give us your comments.
We'd like to just have this
libraries.
sent to council if we have to get that approved, and or how we're going to do that. And
we do have some other cards, so I just wanted to give you the courtesy for your time.
All right.
And appreciate people's patience on number 3. We will be coming back to that after 1 and 2, but I want to make sure we had your testimony in there. But it sounds like, yes, the CLA is saying we can move that forward to council to decide whether they want to draft an ordinance on that, and we can just make that happen probably.
And then on number 8, we've been trying to figure out a way to bring our libraries back. That has probably been the number 1 issue of all the things that have been cut in the budget, that there's been less understanding by the community. I think we've put a lot of money into building libraries, providing 7-day-a-week service, a variety of things. And what we have found is many of our communities depend heavily on the IT access and also the tutoring aspects of the library. What we have done, if we look at the attachments, and I realize that being a part of the Budget Committee, I've probably been responsible for this as we go out on a money grab. But if you look at attachment 2, you'll see that the library was in fairly decent shape until it was teetering about 09, 10, and then we took them off the map on 10, 11 by adding a variety of things they're paying for that are beyond their skills in the sense of the funding. So the $82 million that we give them is a false, or $75 million that we give them is really a false figure when we ask them for $48 million back, or in that area. So it's one of the few departments that we asked for them to pay their utilities. It's one of the few departments that we asked them to also pay all of their overhead. And so we end up with depleting their ability to do their job. We want to do some fine-tuning because some of these aspects as far as public safety, custodial services, building safety are generally plugged into general services for the city. Here we put it on their budget, and we're trying to find out whether these are also carrying the cap costs, which would also put them well above what their ability to pay. What I'd like to do for this item is that if we like to pass it, but we want to work on, by the time it gets to council, to determine whether it is better for us to deal with an incremental increase to get us up to where Rec and Park is, but on the same time, coordinate where we then may exempt them while they're building up their resources to where they not pay some of these costs, so that, because I don't believe we can afford to just give them a $60 million infusion in 1 year. But if we can set a course to say over 3 to 4 years, we can incrementally by charter raise their base and then look at what we're charging them to make sure that we're not being excessive as it relates to getting money back from them. Because one of the things, we put a sizable amount of money in the human resources account, but yet even with that, we go to them and say, pay for your people. And so we're kind of double billing in the sense of trying to work through some of these activities. So on this issue, I think we are obligated to bring them back. And I think it should be clear that we could actually increase the allocation to the library during the budget process, but they always seem to come out on the second list. And so the only way to secure them is to make it that their percentage increases to where it gives them the viability to run these new existing libraries, to bring the resources in and get them generally off the general fund, that they are funded by a percentage. They do not have to come back to the general fund, and they live within that resource. So that's what we want to be able to do. By November the 3rd, we should have some of these things worked out as to whether it should be incremental, 0.5 each year, or should it be more than that or less, or should it be a 3 to 4 year program. But that's the kind of thing I think the concept we'd like to get to clearly raise their base, but also during the budget process really seriously look at what we're asking them to pay that only 2 departments in the city are paying.
75.
So what's the total budget of the library?
76 million.
Pardon?
What's the total budget of the library department?
It's roughly, it's 82 million. Basically, 75 comes from their allocation of funds, and they make about just under 7 million from their own departmental revenue. But the killer is that we charge them with that budget about 48 million for such things as water and power, electric, natural gas, their cars, their fuel, their human services account, and so the city pays about 27 million. They pay about 22 million.
So this would allow them to get 1% from...
Well, we're looking at, I don't have it in my mind right now what we can afford. I don't think we can give them 60 million in 1 year. And then if we gave them 60 million, we'd ask back 48, so they come out a net of 12. So I think we got to figure it out incrementally. How do we get them there? I think this is a better plan than trying to go out for a partial tax. This is rearranging our base budget as opposed to asking for a partial tax.
Okay. While we're on it real quick, Jack Humperville and Maya Zettler, we can probably pass number 8 on it. I think we're going to have more discussion on 3. But if you'd like, come forward on number 8.
I was a little bit confused in listening to Mr. Parks right now, and also listening to the Arts and Parks committee meeting, in that one of the things that was discussed in some detail was the concept of a parcel tax. As they talked about the last time, a $39 parcel tax would raise about $30 million, 10 of which would go to the actual programs, and $20 million would go out the back door back to the general fund. If there's not going to be a parcel tax, I don't think we have a problem. That's your problem that you got to figure out.
That's not before us. There's no parcel tax before us right here.
Okay.
I mean, there's a suggestion in the report, but the motion doesn't suggest
thank
that.
you.
Okay. Ms. Zettler?
Maya Zettler on behalf of VICA, Valley Industry and Commerce Association. We would just like to echo the sentiments of the previous speaker that we were in opposition of placing this on the ballot as a parcel tax, but would support working on rearranging the budget and helping to find ways, new ways, innovative ways to help fund this core service as it is critical to all of our residents. Thank you.
Well, what I'll move for Rules on Elections Committee is to move forward to council, and between, I think, now and council, we should sit together and come up with what that plan would look like with the budget chair, Mr. Bonge, and myself, the makers of the motion, and see if we can present that in time for the full council. Okay? Without objection, we'll move that forward. Okay, now we'll come back to 1 and 2. Did anybody else put in a card? I'm sorry. Come on forward, please. Feel free to...
Jim, a question. I count more than the required number of council people in the chamber, some of which are sitting on the dais, so they're not committee members. We have a Brown Act problem.
No, we can be in the same room as if they're not participating and not speaking. We have a joint committee meeting, so there's 2 different ones. But Mr. City Attorney, would you like to comment?
Mr. Smith, I believe, is not.
Hold on 1 second,
the
Mr. City
committee.
Attorney.
This is also agendized as a special city council meeting, and so it was specifically agendized that way to accommodate the additional council members attending.
All right, we got the Jim McQuiston seal of approval. Roy, come on forward.
Thank you. I just wanted to offer the support of Librarians Guild. My name is Roy Stone, president of the Librarians Guild. All of our members, all of the library community, as you're all well aware, would appreciate any improvement you can do for funding. And the most secure, as Councilman Park said, is a charter adjustment. And even if it's over a long period, but to build into it some of the funding problems that we've had, just so that we can provide service again. We can hire back people. We can do what you want us to do. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Roy. Appreciate your testimony. Without objection, we'll send that forward. We'll reconvene the joint committee meeting, and numbers 1 and 2 are before us. Why don't we ask CLA to come forward? We'll hear the report. We can do what, number 1, 2. Oh, yeah. Do you want to come forward on number 3 real quick? Sorry. It's just one speaker. And thank you for your patience. We'll forward you instead of sitting through another hour. Mr. Davis.
Thank you very much. My name is Bill Davis. I'm with the Southern California Contractors Association and a proud and happy resident of San Pedro. And I'm here today to speak in support of Councilman Park's request to lay aside the charter amendment provisions of this matter. And we just spoke with the councilman, told him we'd be more than happy to work with him on an ordinance. And I'm speaking also for the Associated General Contractors and the Engineering Contractors Association here. Our 3 associations perform virtually all of the city's work as private contractors, and we really do work actively with the Board of Public Works and the Bureau of Engineering, and we'll be happy to work with the council on a new ordinance for design build.
Okay.
So we're absolutely not going to have a charter amendment.
It looks like there is no charter amendment. I can't speak for Ms. Hahn. We constitute a majority of the committee, so she'll have to have her vote and I'll have my vote. But what Mr. Parks recommended was not that, and our CLA has informed us we could do this by ordinance if necessary. So I do not believe, I can't predict the vote, but I don't believe we will go on forward.
I'll just wait until you do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I would move now so that you can have resolution. I would move that we give this to the CLA to bring to council for discussion whether to do this not as part of a ballot measure, per what Mr. Parks and they have suggested, without recommendation for or against that sort of an ordinance, but to put that before the vote, put it before the council, excuse me, and not the voters. Okay? Is that right? Okay. Without objection, we will send that then forward the full council. We can have that discussion based not on recommending not moving forward with any charter change, but to explore what options we have by ordinance. Okay, numbers 1 and 2.
Because we can.
Thank you.
Because we can do that by ordinance, is what you're
Correct.
saying.
Yep. Thanks. You said that better than me. That was a little.
You said all that to say
That's all
we can
to
do it
say.
by.
Should I do that here? Let's put this up. Well, we have a public. 1 and 2. Hello.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Why don't you walk us, give us the cliff notes. I think a number of people have read the report, but for those who haven't, why don't you walk us through what is in your joint report, and then we'll go to some public comments, and then we'll begin our debate.
Certainly. The joint report before you addresses a variety of motions from a number of council members, and really is relative to DWP board reform. It addresses some budget issues. It addresses general manager removal, et cetera. So it addresses a whole number of issues. One of the concerns through the committees had meetings throughout the community and hearing from the public and from the various motions was to look at options to restructure the Board of Water and Power Commissioners. So the report has 3 options to do that for your discussion. The first option, in essence, would leave in place the mayoral appointees but provide the council with the ability to remove by a 2/3 vote a commissioner. It also suggests the establishment of minimum qualifications by the board, for board members. It also allows the council to veto a removal of a board member for the Department of Water and Power. Option 2 is a bit more expansive. It would include appointments from the council president to be confirmed by the city council. It would contain some of the other elements in option one, including establishing criteria for some of the board members. And option three is again, I'm not going to go into detail. I know you're going to be discussing these, but option three is sort of an offshoot of option two, which really separates the appointing authorities and doesn't allow for removal or any veto by either party of those. So that's the first part of the report. We also deal with the appointment or removal of the general manager. It was a Smith-Perry motion that primarily dealt with that. The report talks about the ability of the council to, by a two-thirds vote, determine that we'll hold hearings, and it sets up a process for removal of the general manager. It's really patterned, I think, after the process for removal of the chief of police. The report also deals with some budgetary issues. My hope is that these are some of the less controversial of those. In essence, it would do two things. It would require that the department submit its budget to the council by March 31st. It recognizes that there will be some changes to that budget before the end of the year, because there will be, another 3 or 4 months worth of financial data to be used. But it will require the submission of the budget so that you will be aware when you're preparing the city's budget of what their budget looks like, what the transfer looks like, what the rate implications are in their budget, et cetera. It also, certainly as you all recall, addresses or tries to address the issue of the declaration of a surplus on the transfer. In essence, what this would do is define what that surplus is, in fact, the amount that existed at the prior fiscal year. The way the charter works, for example, for this year's budget, the transfer was based on gross receipts, gross income, and net income as of June 30th of 2009. Would be the transfer amount for the current fiscal year. That transfer then is made in the spring before the end of the fiscal year, and the board has to declare a surplus in order to make that transfer. So there's uncertainty about what that surplus actually is. So what this would do is, in essence, remove that and say that the surplus is on 09 what the gross receipts and the net income was. So hopefully it would take some of the uncertainty out of that transfer amount. In a nutshell, I think that's what's included in the report. There were a variety of other motions related to, wage parity and pension issues, which, as you know, is taking a somewhat separate track.
And in terms of how we would put this before the ballot, do either of you or our city attorney want to chime in? And I'm not getting into the questions on the substance, but in terms of what, I know we had this before, but not with everybody here. We don't have the single topic necessity, correct? So we have the option of either splitting it up or putting things together? Correct. Okay. Thank you. Nothing like a good succinct answer. So colleagues, just to reiterate that, we can combine as much or separate as much as we want of these into separate ballot or singular ballot measures. With that, okay, unless CEO wants to add anything right now?
No, I think the CLA did a good job summarizing it.
Thank you. Also well said. We will take our public comment. We have, I think, 8 cards. Folks did put on for 1 and 2. If you did, we just took 1 card, but feel free to go for 4 minutes if you want to speak on both 1 and 2. Feel free not to take 4 minutes also. You have up to 4 minutes. We'll run it kind of like we did the other committee meetings. And Ms. Perry, you want to start?
Why don't I call the 4 people who I have their cards. First speaker will be Chuck Ray. Come on up, Chuck. And then Tom McCarthy. Is Tom still here? Okay, great. Kristen Eberhard. Kristen, way back there. Okay. And then Evan Gillespie. Are you here? Okay. Okay, great.
Good afternoon. Thank you for letting me speak. I'm Chuck Ray, the Vice Chairman of the Neighborhood Council's Department of Water and Power Memorandum of Understanding Oversight Committee. The community's been waiting for several weeks to see what kind of ballot measure might be coming out on strengthening the governance of the Department of Water and Power. What I see in the report seems excellent, and it's a real quantum leap from where we are now, and should do a great deal towards improving governance. On I would want to note that in the 6 DWP reform meetings that you've held, most of the speakers seem to stress 2 important points: transparency and independence. When I look at the recommendations in the report, I do find 2 fatal flaws. First of all, it says that it recommends that the ratepayers advocate be appointed by the mayor, and second, it isn't clear about firm funding. The funding is going to be determined yearly by the CAO. Those 2 things, I think, will not work very well with the community. I would suggest that the neighborhood councils might actually want to use their newfound talent at fighting against propositions like Proposition B, and might actually line up against this if you went forward with these 2 poison pills. I'd suggest that, particularly on the appointment of the ratepayers advocate, that if you do change the composition of the board so that you've got some people who understand a vote from a ward, you've got some people who understand water, not just the kind of people we have now, although 1 or 2 of them are good. I'd like to take my other 2 minutes now.
Go ahead, sir, please,
if you
go
don't
ahead.
mind. That would be okay, but you have a problem if you do separate these, that if one passes and the other doesn't, then you have the board over on one, and you have the ratepayers advocate on the other, so you'd have to cover that little technicality somehow. I've created for you a comparison sheet of 3 plans for the...
we run another 2 minutes. We're doing up to 4 minutes, whoever's controlling the clock. So if it goes to 2, people can go to 4 when they fill it up.
again after this.
Thank you.
That describe three plans. First of all, what the neighborhood councils asked for and passed a motion on is in the first column. The second column is what I read in the recommendations from the CLA and the CAO. And the third column is what the Department of Water and Power is concocting on their own to create their own version of a ratepayers advocate. I kind of like what they've done. It was a dysfunctional process, but it's coming together very well. And the major thing that I like about it is that they are recommending that there be created a nonprofit public benefit corporation that will be totally outside of the politics. That has been what has been one of the big problems with the governance of the DWP. So I'd like to ask you to get rid of those 2 poison pills, because I know some people are already planning to do something about it if you don't. And remember Proposition B. And finally, don't snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. Thank you.
I think we share that. Thank you very much, Mr. Roy. I think it was Tom McCarthy was next. And after Mr. McCarthy will be Kristen Eberhard.
Good afternoon. I'm Tom McCarthy. I'm Vice President of the Water and Power Associates. We send you a newsletter every quarter, so we're not new to you. Water and Power Associates is a nonprofit, independent, and private organization formed in '71 to inform and educate public officials and public about critical water and energy issues affecting Los Angeles and Southern California. Its members are retired managers of the Los Angeles Water and Power, academics, business people, and we try to evaluate energy and water issues from the perspective of consumers and ratepayers. Pass out here. I'm going to talk to 1 and 2, and I'd like to pass out these. Thank you so much. And what we've done here is basically we have an overall letter, and then we have a chart that we break down every option that you're discussing now. The first one being on option 1, independent analysis of ratepayer advocacy. This capability already exists. A dedicated staff in the CEO is charged with performing this function for proprietary departments. That is appropriate and function that should be provided with all resources necessary to ensure the council has the support it needs. A separate staff would tend to create issues to justify its existence, Key point to make sure that the City Council gets good analysis and balances DWP policies and program with the interest of the ratepayers. As an example, recent mandates that DWP increase energy production to reduce greenhouse gases should be carefully weighed against cost increases to DWP customers. If done right, the policy trade-offs will be very transparent. However, if the Council wishes to proceed with an alternative approach, it can create a new office by ordinance. No charter amendment is needed.
Sorry, she was handing something out. Don't worry. You have two more minutes. Go ahead.
Okay. Of the major governance changes under consideration, we recommend the adoption of the approach that would give Council the authority to remove DWP General Manager or DWP Commissioner with a 2/3 vote. It is our belief that General Manager or DWP Commissioner member loses confidence of the 2/3 of the City Council. They should be removed to restore the trust needed to work together on major water and power issues facing the city. We think such an approach will help ensure the DWP Board and DWP General Manager clearly understand they are equally accountable to the Mayor and City Council, not just the Mayor. This appears to have one of the prime causes of friction over the ECAP this last spring. The General Manager in particular should recognize the importance of being equally candid with both the Council and the Mayor. The other proposed major changes in governance structure would seriously weaken the checks and balances between executive branch of the city under the Mayor and legislative branch on the City Council. The option in the CLA-NCO report number 1 is on page 4 of their report is similar to what we're saying. Also, they mentioned on page 7 the structure on the CLA-NCO report. We oppose the transfer of budgetary authority from DWP Commission to the Council, which jeopardizes the long-standing separation of funds of proprietary departments and raise out their own revenues. In particular, revenues paid to DWP by ratepayers are collected as sole purpose of paying water and power service. The independence of the DWP Board offers the appropriate separation of powers in this regard. This is why the City Charter very explicitly created separate proprietary funds for major revenue. Producing departments. Separation from general fund of the city also provides assurance of the bond rating. We oppose elimination of the required consent of the DWP Commission to make this surplus transfer. The language exists to ensure financial integrity of the proprietary funds, and in case of the DWP, to make sure the funds are available for debt service obligations. For this reason, a change in provision would cause concern to those DWP bonds and those who buy them. And the last piece is that the City Council has authority to do all of these things they discussed under charter amendments under consideration. Thank you.
Okay. Kristen Eberhard. Where should I? Where are you taking this? Okay, there.
Good afternoon. Kristen Eberhard with NRDC, the Natural Resources Defense Council. I want to speak to the ratepayer advocate or inspector general position that's being proposed. This is a great opportunity to increase transparency and rebuild trust with our hometown utility. And it comes at a moment when LADWP is going to be making some critical decisions about modernizing their infrastructure and moving us towards a clean energy economy. But in order to make the most of this opportunity, there's a couple of clarifications that I think the ballot initiative should make about the qualifications and the mandate that this position is setting up. First, the person that fulfills this position, or people, need to be qualified experts in utility regulation who can give a competent third-party analysis of LADWP's decision. It's this type of expert analysis that will really help the council and the public understand the decisions that the utility is making and how they might play out over the next 10, 20, or 30 years. And second, it should be clear in the ballot initiative that the analysis being asked for is one that not only investigates abuse and fraud and rate increases from the utility, but also increases transparency by analyzing the range of inputs and the possible outcomes from decisions coming out of the utility. So this would include, for example, the risks of taking one path versus another. The Energy Information Administration has predicted that fossil fuel prices are going up over the next 10 years. And so remaining dependent on fossil fuels might create a risk. And having a third-party analysis of what that risk entails would be helpful. Another example is clarifying the impact on customer bills and not just rates What customers pay at the end of the month or at the end of every 2 months, as it is with LADWP right now, is a bill. And the utility has a lot of opportunity to help customers with their bills through energy efficiency programs. An analysis of what opportunities are being taken and missed would be useful. Thank you.
All right, Evan Gillespie.
Hi, good afternoon, and thanks for the opportunity to comment. My name is Evan Gillespie. I'm the regional representative for the Sierra Club. The reform proposals that are being talked about today offer a range of options that I think really reflect the urgency and the necessity to improve transparency and access to good information at the Department of Water and Power. These are priorities we fully support. Our expectation of the utility is that it'll operate transparently, that it'll be held accountable to the public, and that it'll be accountable to the public, and that it'll procure energy in a way that is sustainable. The city has a number of challenges, though, as Kristen mentioned, that it has to address in short order if we're going to modernize our utility. We have to move forward quickly and at large scale on energy efficiency, on renewable energy projects. These are investments that are critical not only to meeting the urgent need created by climate change, but also fostering the type of economic development here in LA that's going to really power the 21st century economy in Los Angeles. In order, though, to evaluate those choices, it is critical that we have timely, reliable, comprehensive information so that, and the proposals today, I think, are a really good step forward in making sure that we can get access to that information. I want to emphasize one critical distinction, though, in the scope of work being proposed for the ratepayer advocate. In our efforts to maintain the utility's preferable rate structure, as opposed to, say, Southern Cal Edison or another neighboring investor-owned utility, it's really important that the analysis focus on how to protect customer bills and not just chase low rates. Ultimately, we care about the bill we pay at the end of the month, not the per-unit cost of energy. And so, for example, California has some of the highest energy rates in the country, but we're blessed with actually some of the lowest bills. And that's in large part thanks to 40 years of investments that we've made in energy efficiency. And so whereas other states, Florida, Texas, have lower rates, they actually have higher bills than Californians. Furthermore, short-term decisions based upon what's cheap right now won't necessarily produce the most cost-effective or beneficial outcome for ratepayers in the long run. And so, for example, we know that the cost of burning coal has historically been a lot cheaper than other sources, but those economics are changing pretty quickly, and we incur an unnecessary financial and environmental risk if we continue on with the dirty status quo. So if we're going to protect DWP customers, we want to make sure that we're thinking in the long term and not just what matters in the next couple months. I'll wrap up really quickly. The impetus for reform comes, I think, in part out of conversations about the city's finances, the economic downturn. We're all cutting back right now, and so information about how the city's spending its budget, or how the utility is spending its budget, is a productive and very helpful request. Greater transparency, timely access to information will all be very beneficial. So we appreciate your leadership, and thanks for your time and attention to this important issue.
Thank you, Evan. Maya Zettler is our next speaker, then Jack Humperville, Noel Weiss, and Jay Handel.
Jay Handel.
Good afternoon, Maya Zettler again on behalf of VICA, Valley Industry and Commerce Association. If possible, I wanted to speak about both of the items on the agenda before you today. VICA is in opposition to the creation of a ratepayer advocate or inspector general position at LADWP. VICA is overwhelmingly opposed to the creation of any of these positions. We feel that the responsibilities handled by these positions are already the job of the LADWP commissioners, the city controller, and other city departments. In addition, VICA is opposed to the added costs of this position, noting that it would not only call for an additional position, but an entire department of attorneys and researchers. We feel this would be a waste of ratepayer dollars to hire new division within LADWP, and therefore we're asking for you to oppose that proposal before you. In terms of the other proposals to place on the ballot, the provision to allow the city council to remove a general manager by a 2/3 vote, VICA is in opposition to that, as well in opposition to the removal of DWP commissioners by a 2/3 votes of the city council. VICA believes that the mayor should have the authority to appoint and remove as well any general managers at his will, as they are the leaders to help carry out his vision for the department and for the city. The same, we believe, holds true for the mayor's commissioners. In addition, VICA opposes providing the annual budget of LADWP to be adopted by the City Council. We do support LADWP having to submit its budget to the council for review by the March 31st deadline. We just do not support having the budget approved by the City Council. In terms of the reorganization of the Board of Commissioners, we support the option number 2, allowing for the mayor to designate 2 appointments, the council president 2 appointments, and 1 appointment on a rotating basis between the council president and the mayor. We have stated very clearly in the past and would like to state again today that we are in strong opposition to allow any neighborhood councils to appoint a member of the DWP Commission. We hope that you will consider these proposals before you today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sutherland. Jack.
My name is Jack Humphreyville. I'm with the Greater Wilshire Neighborhood Council. I want to talk about 2 things. First, the board. I think it's critical that we have an independent board, and the reason we need an independent board is so that we can get a decent general manager. Nobody in their right mind is going to come to work for DWP with a board of commissioners that is so politically oriented that nothing gets done. The people on the board don't know an amp from an ohm for the most part. And in order to attract the right kind of people to run this set $20 billion operation with $4.5 billion of revenues a year and $1 billion of operating profit, you need somebody good. I think that with regards to the board, we need to establish the independence, make sure that there are set up a standards or credentials of what we want for board members, whether it's organizational experience or regulatory experience, environmental experience or financial experience. We need decent people that know what they're doing. Finally, I also think that we ought to have a representative from the neighborhood council on the board, primarily because, or homeowners, primarily because they're the guys that are paying the bills. And I think they ought to have a little bit of representation. With regards to the ratepayers advocate, I think you've blown it. This report today, the report that we received was nothing. It's just hard to comprehend. The City Council has a great opportunity to establish itself as a leader in creating increased transparency and openness by establishing a well-funded, empowered, and truly independent ratepayers advocate to oversee the operations, finances, plans, strategies, and management of DWP on a timely and continuous basis. In reaction to the shenanigans surrounding the DWP and the ECAF fiasco, a supermajority of the council endorsed motions calling for an ombudsman, inspector general, and/or a ratepayers advocate. You also endorsed a number of transparency motions. The City Council even scheduled a series of 6 citywide meetings to hear the concerns of citizens and ratepayers, as well as provide some feedback about the independence, funding, and the role of the ratepayers advocate. Unfortunately, after the review of the CAO memo, it appears that you blew the opportunity to be the transparency leader. For example, with regards to independence, we were told that the ratepayers advocate would not report to any elected official or any entity controlled by such officials. Yet the memo has the RPA reporting to the DWP Board of Commissioners. You have the CAO developing the budget, contrary to various comments at the outreach meetings. As for powers, the memo is trying to limit the powers of the ratepayers advocate. For example, will the ratepayer advocate be able to get a better understanding of the efficiency of DWP's operations by benchmarking against other similar utilities? It almost seems like we were at different meetings. And this memo was crafted in the bowels of City Hall with tons of non-public input. Furthermore, it also appears that the copies of this memo were released prior to the release to the general public and the Oversight Committee. DWP is a citywide issue. DWP serves 1.4 million power customers and about 640,000 water customers. Probably the best example of what is going on, or the ratepayers, is what happened with Measure B, where a ragtag group of uber gadflies and professional antagonists, as well as a few extra bellyachers, defeated Measure B despite being outgunned by millions and being sued by various lawyers. If Measure B were on the ballot today, I would guarantee you that it wouldn't be defeated by 50.5%. I would dare to say that it might be even 60%. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Noel Weiss. And thanks, Jack, for all your work on this as well.
Yeah, Jack's been phenomenal. You know, I think the only thing that VICO omitted from its presentation was that if you enact a ratepayer advocate, that probably the bondholders would, or the bonding agencies would probably lower your rating or something. I think the importance of the debate is critical. I'm an idea guy. I think the City Council promotes citizen empowerment, and they promote the idea of a full debate. What we have with the DWP is probably the most arrogant agency I have ever seen. There is no effective check and balance in the city. The city attorney can do nothing because of a supposed ethics conflict of interest. The controller won't be able, is just not able to do anything. We need a true independent ratepayer advocate / inspector general. Now, I suggest, by way of an analytical construct, that we try to come to some agreement, or the council come to some agreement on some core principles: independence, accountability, openness and transparency, and citizen empowerment. Those core principles. Anything that you need to do, anything that you do, should be consistent with those principles. That aids you in making your decision, because that which is consistent with those principles you do, that which is inconsistent with those principles you don't do. My proposal going forward for your consideration is that the ratepayer advocate / inspector general, and they should be combined, one, be backed with a whistleblower protection law. This is critical to weed out fraud, waste, and abuse, and it enables the city attorney to better be able to do their job. It's in effect a de facto waiver of the attorney-client privilege for this purpose, which is appropriate. Number two, the ratepayer advocate needs to be elected. You have to have faith in the people who elect you. This idea that the special interests are going to somehow, override, they're going to override if it's silent. I think include in there some Lincoln Douglas debate type mandate on Channel 35, 3 or 4 hours, something. But the bottom line is, I got Meg Whitman's $140 million basically going for governor. I think she's going to probably lose because of the fact that people are concerned about somebody spending that kind of money. It has to be elected. That's the moral authority. That's the legal authority that basically comes from it.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. You put in a card just on one of these. Just FYI.
Consider this a card on the second.
You want to be on number two as well?
Yes.
All right, then you have 2 more minutes.
All right, fair enough. Subpoena power, and also there should be a representative of the ratepayer advocate / inspector general in every single council office. I would anticipate a budget of $15 or $20 million, and I think it would effectively enable the council members to service their constituents better, provide a clearinghouse of information, and basically provide a cogent public debate, which for most things before this council really doesn't happen if you really want to be honest with yourselves. So going forward, in terms of these other matters on number two, frankly, most of them I just think are deflections and a lot of window dressing. It's typically what happens with politics. You guys can pat us all on the head and say, okay, this is what we're doing, and then come up with either a motion that never sees the light of day, or maybe something that's really more or less a head fake. That's the way I consider most of these other items, with all due respect. However, I think it is appropriate, because this was the fight on Measure B, to respect the difference, the Chinese wall between the proprietary department and the city council. City council shouldn't get involved in running anything by way of a proprietary agency. The charter has been able to succeed in crafting that balance. That balance really needs to be respected. But the idea of adding an ex officio on the board of water commissioners, a neighborhood council representative who doesn't vote but has a right to participate in debates and introduce motions, I think would probably be appropriate and a decent balance. And that basically can be a rotating position. And frankly, if you combine that with the power that the council has under 908 of the charter, never been used, but it would be nice to see one time, that is to have citywide hearings on issues that are important to the council, and then formally basically advise the council. That could be a lever into that. And again, anything that promotes this kind of openness, transparency, debate, discussion is basically to be favored. So that's the summary of my position. And if the city attorney has trouble writing this up, I'm happy to help. Thank you.
Thank you. We're glad you're available. And I know we're not going to respond to all the speakers, but far be it from me to take any wind out of the sails of a good conspiracy. But we have not taken action yet. We have a report before us that none of us wrote, and wait till we make decisions before you write off that this is what this is.
I must disagree also with your contention that the city council has no business running anything about proprietary departments. The charter absolutely sets up checks and balances, even for the proprietary departments, with section 245, where any board action of proprietary department we may take jurisdiction over. Thank you very much. Go study your
Thank you,
charter.
former Charter Commissioner Hahn. Jay Handel is our last speaker. Is he still here? Okay, I think he has departed. Ms. Berry and I think we'll maybe open up some of the discussion on this. There's, if folks want to respond to anything in particular that was said by the speakers, maybe we can do that real quick first.
Why don't we talk to Mr. McCarthy? Mr. Garcetti and I were talking about your letter dated October the 27th, and just wanted to maybe address your understanding, your statement that you oppose the transfer of budgetary authority from DWP Commission to Council. Mr. Garcetti noted, and he can speak for himself, but this is a report. We're asking for them to be required to report on the transfer. We're not trying to transfer budgetary authority. I don't know if that would probably change.
That one maybe you probably phrased the sentence not quite right.
Yeah, I want to make sure that at least that your understanding of what we're trying to do is accurate.
No, we just don't want to see that the commission is completely out of the process.
No, we're not. Yeah, we're not seeking to do that. We're seeking to have them be obligated to report to us.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Did you want to say anything
just
else?
a couple of things. I know that it was mentioned we shouldn't be spending any new money on this, set up a new bureaucracy. I did want to establish for the record, and this is one of the things I think that Ms. Perry and I both want to talk about, and I know that others, Mr. Smith and others, and I should say at the outset, this has been absolutely a group under the Brown Act, which is difficult, a group undertaking. I would say a majority of council members have moved pieces of this forward, have been the leaders, as has the community where this first in some ways came from, many of the bits and pieces. So I think this is something we all want to see succeed, that no one or two or four of us has led. This is the moment in which under the Brown Act we can actually hear each other and hammer some of this out. And the statement that we shouldn't set this up, we spend right now already, I think it was last year, $1.4 million in analysis. We just do that with an outside firm, with PA and Huron. Part of this is telling the ratepayer, you already paid that last year. Don't believe this is the creation necessarily of new money. Let's bring that in-house and have that sort of authority here. I think we have some reactions, and I don't know, Ms. Perry, if you want to say some of yours, and I'll say some of mine, we'll open it up. And then maybe after folks give some initial reactions, we can kind of go through item 1 and go through item 2 and plow through the suggestions there. Thank you very much, Mr. McCarthy.
And thanks for letting me address that point in your letter. I just want to make a couple of opening comments. I think that none of us could have imagined or envisioned a year like we have had over this past year in our interactions with the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, nor could we have imagined what the economy held for us, any of us. So understand that we have a lot of moving parts here. But looking ahead to the future and trying to benefit from the lessons the past year have taught us, and given the vagaries of the future, especially with respect to term limits, no one knows who will be in office, and I think what we are attempting to do is to give a framework that will work for the ratepayer, to give the ratepayer some assurance that information will be given in a fair and forthright and unbiased manner, and that reviews will be conducted in an open fashion, and a public process will be adhered to. I know that there is a lot of debate about roles and functions, and I'm looking forward to hearing what the other members have to say today. I have a number of questions about the inference of the term IG or Inspector General, and Mr. Garcetti, if you want, I can ask my questions now and just put them on the record or go back later.
Why don't we do maybe just statements of kind of our principles of what we're working with, and then we can ask some questions.
All right, then I'll hold my questions.
Okay. Just a couple things on the same lines. For me, I think one thing that we heard, or a number of things we heard, and I've heard Ms. Perry articulate, I've heard other council members articulate, that the importance of DWP reform right now is we don't want to make the mistake, obviously, of taking something that was over-politicized this year and re-politicize it in a new way. What we want is good, impartial, independent expertise and transparency. I agree on much of the stuff that Ms. Perry said and much of what was said by the public. I think in order to have independence, we need to have independent and guaranteed funding that isn't just established, and with all due respect, this has nothing to do with any of us, as Ms. Perry said. Think about this 20 years from now. We have a different CAO, a different CLA, a different council, a different mayor, a different Board of Water and Power Commissioners, and think it through that way. We need somebody who, a CAO may be manipulated by the political currents and say, okay, this year I recommend $0. We need something guaranteed in the charter. I appreciated the term sheet from the neighborhood councils, as I know Ms. Perry did as well, of something around that 0.1%, something that would get us close to what we need to, and we can ask those questions in detail, but I think that's an important principle. Accountability. My opinion, and this was Chuck, thank you for this chart. I think it's a really good comparison of what the group within DWP has been doing kind of behind closed doors, what we've been talking about here, and what the CLA report was, and then what the neighborhood council term sheet was. To me, accountability is a critical part of independence, even accountability of the ratepayer advocate, him or herself. And if you have something that's completely nonprofit outside of DWP, I think you lose that accountability. It's independent in the first iteration, but think again, 20 years down the line, whoever manipulates the control of that, suddenly there is no democratically elected check on that, and it can go haywire. So we want to create the best of independence without losing accountability also for the ratepayer advocate as well. I also think that it's important for input on the hiring of this person to be with the community, with neighborhood councils, to be with business ratepayers, to be with residential ratepayers, to make sure the environmental community is at the table, and perhaps labor, as long as there's no conflict on who that labor rep is. Ms. Perry and I have talked about that as well, and Mr. Smith too. Secondly, after independence, expertise is critical. We need expertise in the Board of Water and Power Commissioners, and so some of what we talk about in number 1 gets to the heart of that, and I'd like to see committee members discuss that about how we can actually ensure that well-intentioned people who may have no expertise in water and or power are at least balanced out by those who do, or get additional skills from those that do, but also that we have, for a ratepayer advocate office, I think everybody has agreed we need somebody who has some expertise. They can't just be somebody who's been a great inspector general type person in a totally different area. We want somebody who understands utilities so they can give good impartial analysis. Third, in terms of transparency, I think it will be very critical for us to have that input again from multiple sources and for there to be a regular reporting of what the ratepayer advocate is analyzing. And I think that the reports do say, contrary, I think, to one of the speakers, it actually is a pretty broad, and I don't know, Ms. Perry, if you read it any differently than me, but the ballot measure and even the summary that you have, I think, Chuck, you didn't say this, is pretty wide-ranging in terms of what the responsibilities and or powers of the ratepayer advocate could be in terms of what he or she could report on. And I think that's good. Mr. Smith has led the way on that, as well as others, in making sure it isn't just analyze rates, take in complaints, but also look at some other things on the functioning, and it says efficiency and effectiveness of DWP. And again, this should be done in a way that will help the department. It is not an adversary of the department, but they will call, them as they see it as well. And then lastly, I think community buy-in is critical. We can't reform this department from inside the department. There are amazing people inside the department who will be the strength of the reform of Department of Water and Power, but if the idea of how we do ratepayer advocate comes simply from the department and is controlled by the department, I think nobody out there that distrusts the department right now will have that trust reestablished. And that has been, I think, a central principle of the council movements on this and the council motions. And while we appreciate, we have a general manager who backs a ratepayer advocate right now, who is there in an interim. Again, take personalities aside. The next moment there's somebody who doesn't, that can all be swept away. And so this is about really putting that in place. So those are the principles that I'm working off of. I know we're going to get greater into the detail, but if other members would like to make some comments or guests that are here as well, like Mr. Smith, why don't we say that and go through the questions?
Much, and I want to first of all thank the committee for taking the show on the road, if you will. I think what we saw last year was a very unfortunate situation where one of our most important departments became one of the most hated departments of the city. And it was unfortunate that the way it evolved over the course of a year's time, that they lost the trust and of not just the people of Los Angeles, but the city council, the news media, and everybody in between. And it's unfortunate because it really is a great department. It's just been a management issue that really fell apart. So I want to thank the committee for taking that out, hearing from the people. I know there's a group out here that became your traveling roadshow with you, but they were very instrumental in giving us some very great ideas, and also to the staff who I think wrote a tremendous report and you can criticize little elements of it, but it really was a well-thought-out policy statement that we can now look through and choose the best parts of to really engender what was brought to us by the community as well as your hearings. And finally, the citizens who really played a role. So I want to thank everybody for doing that. What I saw here in this report, again, is a really great policy statement. And I want to say I really support the general concept. I've said to you and others, I don't care what we call it. It's not significant to me, although I think the concept of a inspector general gives us some legal authority name that really I think stands out. And so what the report was for you is call it the inspector general with a ratepayer advocate component of it, probably has a greater standing in people's understanding what this function will be, that it is a legal function, that it is an empowered function, and that it will give them the ability to look at the department and take action rather than just be another division. And so I think that was a great idea. I prefer, as we look down the options, option 2, I think there are great elements of 1, 2, and 3. And as I've talked to some of you, I think we're going to come out of it today with a hybrid, probably 4, that's elements of all those. I very much want to see that one of the conditions of whatever that we choose, whether it's 5 commissioners, 7 commissioners, that whatever we do, that there are certain criteria placed on those roles, that we do bring forward somebody that represents business, somebody that represents the environment, somebody that represents, Ms. Perry's talked about labor, all those components, but there has to be a citizen component as well. And that was, I think, kind of left out of this report or alluded to, but not really a strong recommendation. That was my early recommendation. And whether we call it a neighborhood council seat or a community seat, that could also include maybe representatives of very large homeowner associations or whatever, that it's got to be a citizen component to that. How we choose to alternate, that's a good debate. But the bottom line has to be that the people of this city feel that they own that agency because they do, and that the board of directors of that agency are put there some way or other through us, through them, that will then bring back the trust that's been missing in the Department of Water and Power. The removal of commissioners and general manager, I think, are critical, and if we can weave that in, that engenders then that check and balance. And I think one of the great things that we're talking about here today goes back to the very foundations of America, and that there's a check and balance system put into place. And that's the key element, and you alluded to that, and I fully support that. And one last concept I wish to interject into this, and it was not addressed here, but the Smith-Cardenas motion of 2005, which began kind of this process really, and that was mandating that there be an independent outside consultant brought in to look at rates. We're kind of now talking about permuting that into something different with a ratepayer advocate. That if we have a ratepayer advocate, that is brought into that portion of the House, that is no longer a function of the Board of Department of Water and Power, but rather the ratepayer advocate. One thing we saw in the ECAF debate was that the consultant, the PA consultants, were totally discredited by the community and by this council because it appeared that they changed their recommendations from day to day based on the pressures that appeared to be placed on them by the Board of Water and Power and Commissioners and or other political activists. So I think we need to bring that function of that original 2005 motion that Tony and I introduced into the ratepayer advocate, let them issue the contracts and or bring in-house to that ratepayer advocate, one way or the other, an ability to analyze those rate proposals. If we don't do it with an outside consultant, then we should have a staff that is able in the ratepayer advocate to do that analytical research. So one way or the other, we have to have that component removed from the Department of Water and Power Board. And finally, the recommendation that this be outside the building, that it be placed in another facility nearby. I think they'll recommend Fig Plaza is a good recommendation. It gives certainly the appearance, if not the long stretch of the arm to water and power, but not that they're a function of water and power, will really, I think, underline that recommendation that it will be an outside agency that is not under the control of water and power. And then the last function is how we go about selecting. I believe there has to be a third party brought into the selection process of the OIG and / ratepayer advocate. That there's got to be a peer review, there's got to be an outside review. It should not be a recommendation of the Board of Water and Power Commissioners. It should not be a recommendation of the mayor or this council. There has to be some other body that brings forward the recommendations of who and how that person is chosen. And I don't know what the answer to that is yet, but I'd like to hear that. But thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. I enjoyed, I went to a couple of the shows on the road and saw some of the same faces at all those shows. But I think the ones that did turn out expressed very much what I think, we've heard here on the City Council, that people of Los Angeles really lost faith in the department over what we saw this last year. And I think many of us were on record saying we even felt deceived by the department a number of times. So certainly the idea for ratepayer advocate, inspector general, the time has come. I agree. I don't think the inspector general or the ratepayer advocate should in any way be appointed by the board or report to the board. I think that removes the independence that I think is so important. I agree with Greg. I don't think it should be appointed by the mayor or the city council. I actually like the idea of that person being elected. I think there's if you want to think of an outside body to, quote, appoint this person, it's certainly election by the people of Los Angeles. And I think if you give people the chance, they always want to elect that person. They want to, they want an elected city attorney. They don't want an appointed city attorney. You give voters a chance anytime, and they do want to elect the person that becomes that. So I imagine there's not a lot of support for that, but I don't have a problem with having the people elect the inspector general or the ratepayer advocate. So, that would be something that I could definitely support. And I do like, one of the good recommendations I think has come forward is the expertise on the commission board itself. Definitely, it seems like as Bill Rosenthal would say, such a no-brainer that one person has at least expertise in water and one person at least has expertise in power. That seems like such common sense, and really don't know why we haven't kind of put that forward before, and I think that's a must. I would be also supportive of increasing the commission to 7 members. This is certainly a very, very powerful, complicated department, and the authority of that commission, the decisions of that commission are huge. So I would be in favor of doing that. We did that in the city charter in 1999. We expanded the airport commission to 7 members, and we insisted that 1 member would serve representing the LAX area, 1 member would serve the Van Nuys area. We did the same thing with the harbor commission. We mandated that 1 person would be from the harbor area. So I certainly think DWP, we should insist that a certain level of expertise is mandated for one of those positions. Really don't have a feeling on how they get appointed. I'm really nonplussed on whether the mayor appoints 1 or 2 and the council president appoints 1 or 2. Wish we could mandate that the city council would have a spine when we used to confirm commissioners, because I think the city council abdicated our authority lots of times in rubber stamping commissions. That was our checks and balances, and yet very rarely did I ever see our council question or reject commissioners that were nominated by the mayor. But that's for another day. Can't mandate that. So those are my feelings on this. I also like the idea of one of the commission seats being a representative of the community. I like the idea of either being a neighborhood council representative or some other way to suggest that 1 member would really be kind of an average person.
Mr. Alarcon.
I concur with a lot of what has been said already. There are a couple of points that concern me. One, I don't think the ratepayer advocate should be appointed by the Board of Commissioners. I also appreciate the matrix that was provided by who was it? Chuck, by Chuck Drake. And I was interesting. I was surprised to find that I concur with a lot of what DWP said in terms of their description of the ratepayer advocate. I disagree on how that person gets appointed, and I don't know exactly how much money we should allocate, but it should be a reasonable amount to conduct the business of the ratepayer advocate. They offered $750,000 over 2 years. I don't know exactly what that means, as juxtaposed against the 1%, the 0. Whatever that figure was.
It was a 0.1%.
0.1
of a percent.
0.1.
0.1 of.
0.1%. Yeah. So I'm sure that's not going to be the critical issue. So in terms of the appointment of the ratepayer advocate, I don't think our choices are limited to the mayor and to the city council, and or the mayor and city council. I believe we have to find an objective body to do that suggestion. I wouldn't necessarily oppose an elected position as well, although I fear some of the candidates that might come up. That's right, they elected me, did they? No. So the concern I would have is that we have a truly objective party. With regard to reforming the board, the composition of the board, I saw a suggestion from Mr. Kiefer and who was the other guy? Who was it? Oh, Chemerinsky. They want to expand the board to 7 positions. I think that might be a better option in terms of getting the diversity of opinion and expertise on the board. And I don't have a problem with that. I believe, however, to change the appointment system. Look, I've been around City Hall since 1981, and I can tell you, to me, it's just musical chairs. I mean, we're not really changing the substance of the board. We're just changing the names on the door, and I don't think much will change. So I frankly think we'd waste the voters' time by presenting that to them. There's one other key point. Oh, on the issue of expertise, I have a different opinion, and that's not that I oppose an expert on water, an expert on power. But these are citizens' commissions. By definition, whether you're talking at the federal, state, or local level, the whole idea of democracy is that the citizenry understand government. And so and plus I think that people who are experts in a thing tend to be supporters of a thing. And if you get a power expert, you're going to get somebody who supports power. And particularly if they have a long-term history, it probably wouldn't be somebody who would have a big problem with buying a lot of coal. And the same thing applies on the water side. I think you get somebody who has a tendency to support the tradition of that particular industry. Although if we had a 7-member board, I think it would diminish the effect of having those expertise, but at the same time provide the expertise in terms of the board representation. So I believe that an effective democracy needs to have a bureaucracy that can effectively communicate to the citizenry, which would be the commission, in a way that the common folk would understand. And I believe that's the intent of a citizens' commission. In that regard, I think citizens are largely, or expertise is largely, exaggerated. The other thing is that in managing a department the size of DWP, I mean, you have as much issues related to legal issues, so would you want to have a lawyer on it? You have as many issues related to personnel matters, so do you want to have a human resources person? Do you want to have the labor person? Do you want to have a business person? I mean, there's so many levels of expertise that are required to manage a department like Department of Water and Power. Like I said, I think that any time anytime you get somebody who is a technical expert in any of these given fields, their biases are going to be brought with them, and it's not as effective as having an objective person. I just as soon have a housewife, quite frankly, and I'm dead serious about this. I just as soon have a housewife representative or a house husband representative on the Board of Commissioners, and I think they would make just as good decisions, if not better decisions. So those are my thoughts. I think we should move forward with, I mean, I'm a strong advocate for the ratepayer advocate position. To give that decision to the Board of Commissioners is like having the fox in with the chickens. It just runs counter to any notion of equity that I can think of. But to give it to the mayor and city council would provide fodder for those who believe that the system is corrupt. And so I think we should find an outside third party that we could create in terms of some kind of citizens advisory group to appoint that person. I think we agree on that, right, Greg? To some extent, yeah. Okay, good.
Mr. Koretz?
A few things. First of all, I think the most important thing is to get some reforms of the board itself. I probably disagree with Mr. Alarcon's comments. I think we should have some expertise. I think the board hasn't worked well. Part of it is because we use the typical method of appointment. For someone to get appointed, they're usually a contributor, a supporter, a friend. Once in a while, there's someone that people think is a good person, don't just have necessarily an on-target spot for them, so they pick whatever happens to be open. I don't think that's necessarily created the ideal commission. I don't know that they have to be the ultimate expert in any field, but I think they have to have some, or ideally should have some expertise in some arena that's relevant to DWP. I'd like to see the appointment split between the council and the mayor in some fashion. I'd like to see it a shorter term, like a 3-year term, as long as it's not only one term, as long as it can be renewed for continuity. I like the idea of a community representative, whether they're voting or non-voting. I think that's a great idea. I think the funding has to be guaranteed in some way, as was discussed. I'd probably think the best way to hire and remove a GM would be to have an improved board do it if we make these reforms. If we don't, I'd like to see the council do it by a 2/3 margin. And let's see, there was one other comment I wanted to make. Oh, and I think the ratepayer advocate should not go to the voters. I think we'd wind up with some massive special interest battles over this, and I don't know that having that kind of an election is what we're really looking at. I think most of the voters would have no clue. So I think we have to find some better way to do that selection.
Thank you, Mr. Krikorian. And Mr. Krikorian, you want to speak next? I think
Yeah.
Mr. Deaton is getting ready to stand up and yell. But in the meantime,
I'm not going to give any real introductory comments. I'll just wait until
Okay.
we get into
All right, great.
the meat of it.
all right. Mr. Deaton, did you want to say anything? Okay. All right. Yeah, there's, let's see, what page are you on? On pages 11 and...
Well, 9 through 11 are the suggestions.
Yeah.
11 is the two
There it is.
non-controversial.
We have two items on here on pages 11 and 12.
Or just 11.
The
It's just-
removal of
just
the
page
Los
11.
Angeles Department of Water and Power General Manager and the Reform DWP budget schedule and require transmittal of budget to the city. Since we still have a quorum of our joint committees, I would like to suggest that we could at least deal with these two items and take a vote on these two items now.
Colleagues, 9 through 11 are all the suggestions, the way the report's written. 11 has, the first two are the ones I think we'll
These two.
ask the
Yeah.
most questions about, which
Yeah.
is board, this is the CLA CAO report. So the first is reform of WP board. The second on page 10 is the IG ratepayer advocate. And then Then the last two are removal of general manager and reforming the budget schedule.
That was page 11, and it goes over to 12 a little bit. They're just the last two, well, actually, it doesn't go to page 12. It's just page 11, the bottom 2 points, entitled Removal of LADWP General Manager, and the second one is Reform LADWP Budget Schedule and Require Transmittal of Budget to City. If those are non-controversial items at this point, since we have a quorum, it might behoove us to go and take a vote on those now.
I'll move.
All right, Mr. Garcetti moves. I will.
I guess we have to do two different votes, so I'll move for our committee, Ms. Hahn, and you can move in your committee.
I'll move for Energy and Environment, a second by Mr. Krikorian.
It would be, so we would endorse today going to the ballot with first, on the removal of general manager, those 4 bullet points of how it's done, essentially a 2/3 vote of the council. And then the second piece is to the motions that were about the budget schedule and transmitting it to the city in the surplus.
It's on page 11,
last
removal
two subjects?
of the DWP manager, general manager, and reform DWP budget schedule and require transmittal of budget to city, page 11, the last 2 points. And what I'm suggesting is if those two are non-controversial, since we have a quorum of both committees right now, we take a vote on that.
Mr. City Attorney?
Yeah, just a question of clarification. Is your vote including the issue at the bottom of page 11 involving the surplus issue?
Yes.
Okay.
Both of those topics.
Okay. Now, if I could just ask a question of clarification, because
Sure.
ultimately this could require drafting if the council so
Correct.
instructs.
It falls on your shoulders, right?
And I've had occasion and had the pleasure of talking to Mr. Miller about some of the details of this, but as I understand it, what you're trying to do is have an earlier determination of the transfer than it presently. Because the way the system today works is that the transfer is made in a given fiscal year retrospectively with regard to the last year. It looks backwards at the prior year in terms of the fiscal, the financial information, and discretion is exercised in the subsequent fiscal year as to whether or not there's to be a transfer. And today, the board has discretion to make the transfer. It's not required to do so. The council, by ordinance, has the same discretion if the board has consented. So, as I understand it, I would like to work with the CLA's office in working out the mechanics of trying to have an earlier determination of that transfer than presently.
Okay. I know Ms. Perry, with all of us trailing behind 7 of us, was the maker of that motion, and I know that CLA has.
Sure, but if I can be very clear, I think what our intent is, as Mr. Merkin indicated, what happened last spring, in essence, was the board, for a variety of reasons, said we don't have the money. The transfer was entirely within their discretion. The intent of this is to remove that. It defines what a surplus is. Now, in drafting the language, we're going to have to provide for the instance in which, when that transfer is made, if there are extraordinary circumstances, we're going to have to take that into account.
Sure.
So that is going to be a language drafting issue. But the intent is to remove that language in the charter now that says that the transfer wouldn't happen at all unless the board, at their sole discretion, says we're going to make the transfer.
And if I could just add as well, there are legal issues. There are master bond covenants that affect the borrowing by the power system. And there are 2 formulas that are required with regard to any transfer over to the city, over to the general fund, reserve fund, the general fund, from the power fund. So that has to be part of the equation as well in terms of whether or not a transfer is at all feasible.
This was initiated by the motion that I did, seeking the definition on the record of the term surplus in the context of the annual or the power revenue transfer, because there was so much debate and discord about what surplus meant and where it was, so it was meant to clarify that.
Yes, and there's actually some law on this point. The city attorney has opined decades ago about the meaning of surplus for transfer purposes.
Okay.
And the timing of that.
As long as they incorporate that.
All right, well, we can incorporate that, Mr. Alarcon.
Again, to Mr. Merkin, does this definition meet the standards that the courts have held with regard to surplus transfers?
What standard do you have in mind?
The standards that the courts have held? These cases have been run through the court, and And
Well, we've had litigation with regard to the water transfer, if that's what you have in mind. There was Proposition 218, which was enacted in 1996, and in the end,
it's my understanding that
fatal to water transfer, which we no longer do.
Well, I understand that, but it's my understanding that cases regarding the transfer of surplus money from power entities, not just in the city of LA, have gone before the court and decisions have been made over the years. My question is, does this definition of surplus meet the standards that are consistent with the findings of the court?
Well, we don't actually have a definition of surplus here, because the surplus is actually some other concept. It's fairly involved. The transfer that's made is not of the surplus. The transfer is made, it's a small segment of the surplus as of the end of the fiscal year. And so this definition, I think it's a question of, there are cases of which I'm aware that place constraints from the common law on the amount of the return on investment. So if you look at the transfer from the power fund to the reserve fund as the city's return on its investment, there are cases that have dealt with the question of what is a reasonable rate of return. And currently, as I understand it, it's 8% of revenues in the prior year.
Well, that's the city's definition. That's
the city's percentage right now. So there is some case law. I have no reason to believe that 8% is unlawful under those standards.
No, I'm not saying the 8%. I'm saying define the term surplus in the context of the annual LADWP Power Revenue Fund transfer to be based on the balance that existed in the fund on June 30th of the prior year.
Yeah.
Is that consistent?
Well, that is, if it's based on that alone does not give us enough information about the formula. We would need to actually know what is going to be the formula for the transfer and all the circumstances surrounding that. To answer your question, this in and of itself I don't find to be illegal, but I think we need to know much more about exactly what is the mechanism that is to be established by charter for the transfer, and then ask, are there any legal problems associated with that?
I concur, and I'm wondering about what the purpose of this is. I mean, because we could set the surplus date any time of the year, right?
You can what? I'm sorry.
I mean, we could say that surplus at any particular time of the year. I mean, why do we need to do this?
As of June 30th?
Yeah.
Well, I think financial statements are done, I think, on a fiscal year basis, and so if you're taking a photograph of the financial condition.
But the transfers occur intermittently throughout the year. They're not necessarily tied to the fiscal statement.
But the transfer is taken in the subsequent fiscal year, but it looks backwards in time to the end of the fiscal year that preceded. That's how the charter has been interpreted.
I love the way Mr. Merkin talks.
Can I just interrupt you for a second?
I'm just trying to get
No.
sense.
I want to ask you, if we're going to lose a quorum, or we're at risk of losing a quorum, would you like to go ahead and vote against
yes.
it? Okay, that's fine. Yeah, all right, that's fine.
I don't really think it has an impact one way or the other, but I'm going to vote no just to be safe. But is that voting no on everything, or are we bifurcating these?
We can bifurcate that.
Yeah,
thank you.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second from Ms. Hahn from the Rules and Elections side, a motion by Perry, seconded by Krikorian on the Energy and Environment Committee to proceed on a vote on this. And Madam Clerk, do you want to do a voice vote on that?
There's no objection, Rules and Elections, we asked. So
We're voting on the two items. We're going to bifurcate them separately. Page 11 of the report, for the record, that the report dated October 26, 2010, to members of the City Council from Jerry Miller and Miguel Santana. The report is entitled Los Angeles Department of Water and Power Governance / Oversight Reform Motions. Again, page 11. The first item we would be voting on is the removal of the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power General Manager. Do you want to see the report? Here. Okay, all right. All right, well, so why don't we, okay. Well,
unanimous on the general manager part, and E&E, one vote against on that one.
I just want to vote against this. I'd like to vote for this.
I would suggest to make a clean record, why don't we do a voice vote, so we have a good, clean record, so nobody's going to go back and say, well, he didn't, or whatever, okay? So why don't we, Madam Clerk, why don't you go ahead and take that first item, removal of the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power General Manager.
Okay, removal of the LADWP General Manager. Council Member Jan Perry.
Aye.
Council Member Tony Cardenas. No. Council Member Richard Alarcon. Council Member Paul Koretz.
Aye.
Council Member Paul Krikorian.
Aye.
Council Member Eric Garcetti.
Aye.
Council Member Janice Hahn.
We're removing the general manager? Oh. Aye.
Council Member Herb Wesson.
Voting to remove the general.
On the section having to do with the removal. To go to the voters.
Okay, just I couldn't hear a response, I guess because I'm blocked. Did Mr.
that was easy.
Mr. Cardenas is not present in the chamber, and Mr. Koretz, did you respond?
Yeah.
You said no? I couldn't hear you.
No, it was yes.
Respond again.
Did you say yes?
On this one.
Okay. I didn't, it was inaudible, I'm sorry, I couldn't. All right,
So
they were ayes.
unanimous on both committees on that one.
All right, so then the second item, and then I would like to ask those present and put the mic closer to your mouth so it can be recorded. Reform Los Angeles Department of Water and Power budget schedule and require transmittal of budget to the city.
But he wants to vote on
I wanted to bifurcate the question.
And you want to bifurcate the points. So the first point, Mr. Alarcon has made a request to separate the points. So the first point, Madam Clerk, if you would read that into the record.
The first point is to mandate submittal of the DWP budget to the council no later than March 31st of each year, with the understanding that final revenue figures and other estimates, such as water availability estimates and costs, will continue to be refined through May.
All right, I'll start that off. Aye. Ms. Perry, voting aye.
Okay. Councilmember Alarcon? Aye. Councilmember Koretz?
Aye.
Councilmember Krikorian?
Aye.
Councilmember Garcetti?
Aye.
Councilmember Hahn?
You vote.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Who are we removing this time?
All right. All right, and the next point, and we bifurcated, if you, Madam Clerk, would read that into the record.
Define the term surplus in the context of the annual DWP Power Revenue Fund transfer to be based on the balance that existed in that fund on June 30th of the prior year.
All right.
Councilmember Perry?
Aye.
Councilmember Alarcon?
No.
Councilmember Koretz?
Aye.
Councilmember Krikorian?
Aye.
Councilmember Garcetti?
Aye.
Councilmember Hahn?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, so we'll
great.
include those. Maybe, colleagues, we can dig in now to the first and second, which started on page 9. We can do DWP board composition first. I know they interrelate, so for some, how the composition occurs.
If they want to, do they have more they want to add on this, and maybe do you want to let
Sure,
them-
yeah. Is it?
Do you CLA, CAO, is there more that you want to add on these remaining 2 points? IG, ratepayer, and composition of the board?
I'm sorry, anything we want to add?
Yeah, is there more information that you want to put out on the record? Because I have questions now, and I want to put them out there. Okay, great. All right.
Good.
All right, great. Why don't we start with, so you're going to go where you're going to stay? You stay? Okay. Okay, good. We're going to, No, I like it when you're here. It's fun. Okay, thank you. It makes it more interesting.
Mr. Zine?
All right, before we move on, Mr. Zine wanted to make a comment on board composition.
Dennis P. Zine.
Thank you for this distinguished panel, and it's a pleasure to see Mr. Deaton in the house once again.
Yeah.
Pardon me? I'm not out of order, am I, Mr. Alcott?
Not yet.
Thank you.
Let's go to it.
I did a motion on this matter, and I'm concerned about the ratepayers and the process looking at this system of a ratepayer advocate, looking at the cost if it was a paid person with a staff between $500,000 to $1 million to run that operation, if that ratepayer advocate would then be accountable to the commission, which would then be overruled by a 245 of the city council, or they would be totally and completely independent, which would remove the council or, in fact, the general manager when they're discussing rates. The idea I came up with and submitted a motion on this, and what I'd like to have offered for consideration is to have what I would consider a truly independent commission. That would be a commission as we have with the other commissions, police, fire, other city commissions, where you would have a 5-member commission that would be, number one, appointed by the mayor, one by the council president, one by the controller, one by the city attorney, and one by a neighborhood council. They would pick the individual from the 91 neighborhood councils, and I believe that way you would have a composition of 5 truly independent individuals who would serve the public in that ratepayer advocate without the cost, if you would have a ratepayer advocate that would be compensated in a salary with a staff, benefits, etc. So the recommendation that I wanted this group to consider is having that configuration and see if that would be a possibility to pursue. I know there's a recommendation for 2 appointed by the mayor, also appointed by the council president, but I think if you have 5 appointed, include the city attorney, controller, and someone appointed by a group of neighborhood council members, and have some knowledge and experience in that opportunity would save the taxpayers, the ratepayers, the cost, at the same time have it a truly transparent commission. Thank you, Ms. Perry, for your smile. Thank you.
Thank you very much for stopping by, Mr. Zine. And I know you want to be on your way. So thank you.
Should we open the roll, close the roll, and tab?
No, that's what you do. Now, Mr. Miller, Mr. Santana, it's my understanding that the Inspector General, the term Inspector General, carries with it a set of standards and practices that require that one in that position meet educational requirements, has access to professional standing, training, networking, and instruction for behavioral standards, and it is a nationwide industry with conferences. And there is much discussion going on right now about the term or the use of the word Inspector General in addition to a ratepayer advocate. In either one of your viewpoint, what does the term Inspector General infer? And if you are able, how does that relate to a term like analyst?
Well, certainly a ratepayer analyst and an Inspector General ratepayer advocate, I don't view it all as the same thing. I think ultimately it does come down to a lot of the discussion you heard here and you've had amongst yourselves and the motions is what role this position plays. An Inspector General does have a certain definition of what that means, and it is it has broad authority to look at a variety of functions. I think, as we indicated, really the duties that we describe are really, I think, consistent with an Inspector General. And we do propose that they have a ratepayer advocate function, which again would be focused on the impact of the decisions the department's making on the ratepayer. As some of the speakers indicated, it wouldn't be just about making the bills the lowest, but would be advocating for the ratepayer owner on making sure that on a long-term basis the system is working properly through the rates that the Department of Water and Power collects. So.
Mr. Santana?
Well, at the end of the day, I think it's, the language could define what either one of these terms are. But I think what the issue is what the public will perceive it to be. And I think that, as you indicated, an inspector general carries with it greater responsibility, greater independence, greater powers, versus an analyst that is assigned specific tasks by either the DWP board or whichever body it reports to. And so whether it has the ability to engage in its own independent investigations would be more limited as an analyst versus an inspector general who has a broad array of authority to engage in investigations that are generated by the governing board. It could be generated by the public. It could be generated by anonymous sources. So they're very distinctive responsibilities.
This is the same thing. You're talking about the same thing. No, advocate and IG/analyst are different. Now, the description of the responsibilities in the CLA report cover the responsibilities that one could expect from an IG. I want to know your perceptions on, or your beliefs that an IG and a ratepayer advocate can function in one office, fulfilling a different purpose.
Well, certainly, yes. I think that's, I think part and parcel to being a ratepayer advocate and focusing on rate proposals and what it's going to take to fund the department's operations is having access to the kinds of information that the inspector general function would have relative to, how things operate and getting access to reports. And so I think it's a function that could very well be part of an inspector general function and need access to the information that the broader inspector general type function would have.
I'm just going to use the term inspector general for now because of what I said in the beginning about it carrying a specific set of standards and practices with it and educational requirements. And then we're going to have a discussion about whatever term we can reach consensus on. But I wanted to note for the record that it's very important to me that an inspector general have the ability to get information, operate with confidentiality, be independent, professionally recognized, have proper credentials, and understand the structures of local government and the utility. One thing I have learned from working on transportation projects, and I wanted to take some of that experience and put it here for discussion, I think it's also important that an IG have a tracking system that is presented for information that is presented to them. The date, the time, the purpose of communication for investigation, decision-making purpose, and the disposition that is logged into a system. And in other words, there should be a system of records that can provide a background for this individual's analysis and decision-making. In other words, basically everything that went into every contact and every bit of input that came externally or was self-generated, to be able to track that if there's a need to reconstruct or if there's a need to basically understand the details. And I wanted to know if any consideration had been given to this issue. The reason it kind of rather, I guess, dawned on me is just some of our interactions with the PUC and the protocols in which we have to engage in order to approach the PUC from the Metro Expo Authority in terms of documenting why we want to approach, making a record of that and not causing a chilling effect so that people will feel that they can't approach the IG, but just making a body, a record, so that it can be very well documented. And I wanted to raise this as an operational detail and get your reaction to that.
Certainly that would be fine. I think my concept of how this would proceed, should it get approved, would be that the charter would require the establishment of it and really establish the qualifications of Inspector General, whatever the term is. But then there would also be an implementing ordinance that would detail some of the things that you're talking about today, because I don't think we would want the charter to go into that much detail and then have to go back to the voters to amend it if we see that it needs to be changed. So
Right.
those are exactly the kind of issues I think we deal with in the implementing ordinance.
Okay, that's fine. All right, I wanted to raise that. Okay, why don't I take a break right now, and then we'll go back to some more questions, but give Mr. Garcetti and the other members a chance to ask questions.
Thank you, Ms. Perry. One of the things I'd like to see, I don't know, I think my staff asked CFLA analyst from Energy Environment Committee about the Huron and the PA contracts, which were $800,000 and $600,000 last year. Was that right? It was 1.4. $1.4 million would represent how much of the DWP operating budget right now? Or let me put it this way: the 0.1% would be about, we've been told, about $4 million. Is that correct?
That would be about right. It's $3 billion on the power side, and what's the water side? That's approximately right, yeah.
So obviously there's some things that it often costs more for outside contractors, but that said, as your joint reports suggest, there's more than just analysis of rates and some of the work that was done in those two reports. So we probably would have we would need some additional resources for some of the additional duties that were a part of this. Is 0.1 a decent amount to suggest? I mean, what I would like to see is that was in the term sheet for that was put forward, I believe, by the neighborhood councils. When we're looking at the amount of money, we don't want to be frivolous with this money. We certainly all feel that, and we want to make sure that it really saves more than it costs, and I'm convinced that it will, which is why this has been so important. But is that, is $4 million as, a current value assessment capture what as you've described in this report, cover the responsibilities of what this office would need to have? Would you recommend less? Would you recommend more?
In my view, $4 million should certainly be sufficient.
So I'd like to put that forward then, a motion to put that into the detail that that would be a floor. The CAO, as it's described in here, could suggest above that. I just want to make sure that no CAO or anybody could ever go below that. Again, between now and council, if there's some computation you feel very strongly it should be 0.05 or it should be 0.2, I mean, let us know, but do some thinking about that. I know we've talked about that, but in the meantime, to give some flesh to it, I would say 0.1. On this, Mr. Smith?
Track requirement in the 2005 motion.
Say that again, I'm sorry, I missed that.
Would that then include funding of the PA-type consulting contracts as mandated in the 2005 requirements?
So would that come out, you mean, with the ratepayer advocate?
Then, yeah. Is that part of that $4 million? You'd have staff and then the consulting contracts, or do we need to allocate that separately?
I would initially say as a floor, yes, but if that's 1.6 out of it, then you leave another $2.5 million for the operations of the office. I'm open to higher or lower suggestions. I just think we need to start pegging it someplace. So, no, it's not for one person.
Let's pick up Rizzo for that.
It's for this entity, which would include, it sounds like this entity, whether it's called Inspector General or something else, will include something called a ratepayer advocate in that, but they will do some additional things. So it's for I'm suggesting this for the whole enchilada.
That's what he's getting at.
Okay.
Don't talk about enchiladas right now.
Mr. Krakoyan, did you want to chime in on this?
I just want to make sure I understand that your concept is that this would be a guaranteed minimum funding so that there wouldn't be any political effort to defund the program, for example. You have a fixed floor, and then if there were a need for additional consulting contracts or so on, there would be an option for the ratepayer advocate, or whatever we call it, to seek additional funding for specific purposes.
Absolutely. So it's not a ceiling if we happen to lowball it. I want to get to a good minimum, but for me it's a deal killer too. I know one of our speakers described this as a deal killer. If we don't have some sort of guaranteed funding that the political winds can sweep away, we're not doing much of anything.
I think that's important too, but then if there is a need for additional funding, what would be the process by which that additional funding would need to be approved?
Well, I think what was suggested to us is still a good one. I'd stick with that, which is the CAO suggests what that budget should be. One thing that wasn't in here, or wasn't clear in here, is whether or not then there needs to be council approval for that. I think there should be.
Yes.
I mean, it's because I assume that was part of it, but that wasn't spelled out. So it would be, the CAO could then come
And what about board approval? If these funds are going to be coming out of the DWP budget, would the proposal be to require board approval and council approval? One or the other?
What did the report envision?
What this envisioned is that it would be a number provided to the board that they would be obligated by charter to include in their budget. It's somewhat similar to, I guess, our pension systems where they tell us what our budget is. The council has no authority to change that.
But that would be the floor. I'm saying if there were additional funding requirements above the floor, who would need to approve that additional funding request? The DWP board or the council or both?
As this is envisioned, it would be the council, and it would then be transmitted to the board for them to include in their budget, regardless of the funding. As I understand the proposal, the .01 would be the floor. The CAO annually would develop the budget for this function, and they would then submit it to the council, and then which would then be transmitted to the board, and then they would be obligated to include that in their budget.
What we could say is you could still have what you envision, which the CAO does this. Sorry, Mr. Alarcon, I'll call you one second. But that it would need to be a recommendation of at least that 0.1. I mean, that's a way of achieving that.
Yes.
So that it was, CAO, it's the same language that's in our report, but we add to it, it shall not be lower than 0.1% of the operating budget of the department. Mr. Alarcon and then Mr. Smith.
Just because it's in the charter to be provided doesn't mean it has to be spent.
Right.
And so if the board doesn't authorize their position authorities, for example, then who's going to be accountable? I don't think we can have it be accountable to the Board of Commissioners. And otherwise, they just won't spend the money.
Correct.
And so you can have $4 million, but if they don't spend it, it won't get done.
Is anybody suggesting that? I don't think anybody's suggesting the board so far.
Yeah, so my question was how, and then we could always spend less depending on the circumstances. I don't know how much of that might be held in a reserve for special occurrences, like a massive investigation or something. Mm-hmm. So in terms of approving the budget, and the expenditures, I don't think it should be at the Board of DWP Commissioners.
Yeah, I don't think that's suggested in the report, and I certainly believe that too. Mr. Smith?
Well, I think the report suggests that the CAO determines the allocation of funding for staff, so that would then come through a council process. So I think that's fine. That solves that problem. And as far as setting the floor, I think it's the right idea. We just recognize, or it has to be recognized in the report then, that on the basis whenever a recommendation comes from the Board of Water and Power Commissioners to do a rate increase, that they, under the 2005 ordinance, would still have to fund it, because that was the requirement that we placed on them in 2005, that they had to fund the outside consultant. So there'd be an external extra allocation above and beyond the floor then that's established.
And I also, just to be clear, I want to make sure there's no confusion also. There is a separate annual IEA requirement. This would have nothing to do with that. That's the separate 5-year audit that does a lot of the benchmarking and positioning and strategic planning that some of the speakers referred to.
Great. So if we have that, and if there's consensus on that one element, we can peg that right now for the drafting. The second piece I wanted for us to talk about, and I could maybe throw something out as a suggestion. I think that what I've heard from council members and what I heard from a lot of the public testimony was that it might be best to have, or one way we could approach this is we could have a committee of different stakeholders that would nominate who the ratepayer advocate, now I'm talking about within a larger office, who this ratepayer advocate is, who the ratepayer advocate would be, subject then to council approval, mayoral sign-off, which could then be, vetoed, overridden, and the veto could be overridden. So in essence, what we would say is what we could do is bring together, and I'd be curious what folks think about the constitution of this, but then you could have business, you could have small and large business, you could have residential, you could have renter and homeowner, you could have environmental community, which we heard, and we could guarantee that a certain number would have to be neighborhood council members, something like that, but that those are the folks that help come together to either advise and or nominate. If folks wanted to have that advisory body, then whatever entity we decide nominates, then they could give the comments on who that person is as well.
Why would they be doing that? I mean, Is this something you want to put on the ballot?
No, I think as we look at, I mean, what I would propose putting on the ballot part is we don't have to necessarily detail, again,
Yeah.
the implementing ordinance
Yeah.
could say the division of it, but that they would have to have some sort of community body that would be the check-in for this. I think if we don't do that, folks would think we can just cook this up amongst, you
Well,
know.
but we're not cooking it up because we're talking about it out here on the record.
No, I don't mean in
yeah.
that sense. I mean that somebody could, that if it was just, let's say the mayor, for instance, you know, nominating, that there would be no kind of community check and input on who that person was. I
Well,
think that's a critical
I think
pillar.
we can talk about that, although that's not what we're voting on, and it's probably falls in the same category of what I just offered up as an operational detail, and maybe we can work through that as part of the implementing language.
That's definitely something that could be in the implementing ordinance, and
Yeah.
also over time, the body that nominates these individuals may change. So it may be advisable to include that in the ordinance as well.
If the remaining members here are on the similar track, I'd like to get into the issue of the composition of the board, and whether we go to 5 or we go to 7, to see if we can achieve some consensus on that, and how we categorize that. Just for the record, my position is that I am favoring the elements, or I agree with most of the elements, actually all of the elements, in option 2 of the report on page 4, sort of almost at the bottom of the page. That is where I am, option 2, because I think it creates enough dynamic change with framework still in place, and gives us something pretty clearly delineated to examine and vote on. So I guess the first issue that we can discuss, and I know there are some members who have different opinions of whether or not we stay with a board of 5 or we go to 7. I'm more than comfortable with staying at 5, and we can get into discussion about how to get there and how we make it up, but I'd like to hear from some of the other members. Maybe we can start with, since I'm energy and environment.
Can I just finish one?
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry. So in terms of making sure we kind of do this organized, because I know we can jump back and forth between the commission stuff and the IG ratepayer advocate piece. I think the things for us to consider are, how is this ratepayer advocate going to be selected? So what's the governance model for that? And I know there's some suggestions on that. We've also had input on this, and the role of neighborhood councils in that. On number 2, if I'm correct, Mr. CLA doesn't have that on the second one, but does on the first. And there's a way I think we could marry those and ensure that neighborhood councils had a role, if that was the desire of folks. I'll tell you my own opinion in a sec, but.
You're asking about on the board?
This is not the board composition yet. This would be on the selection of. There's a board composition question too.
I thought we had shifted into that discussion.
Well, I know, that's why I respect that we're going to have to do that as well. I just want to make sure we get both done. So one, we hadn't really tied up at all. So I was just trying to lay out what the 3 or 4 things we're going to look at. How is ratepayer advocate selected, if there's one? Okay, how's that person nominated? To whom do they report to? Then the board piece, which Ms. Perry brought up, is how many people are on the board and how are they selected? So I think those are the 2 main things, if there's no opposition to creating this opposite, that members will need to chime in on, and what role do different community entities have in either one of those. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I still think it's an implementation issue. The issue that we need to vote on is whether or not we're going to have a ratepayer advocate. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so.
As opposed to.
And I would suggest
the
voting on
ratepayer
deciding
advocate.
what it is that you want to call this.
Yeah.
Right. So there's nobody that is there anybody that objects on either committee right now to the creation of that entity? Name aside right now. An entity as suggested in the CLA-CAO report.
You want to take a poll?
No.
Are you sure?
I mean, just as a kind of operating principle.
Yeah.
Okay.
You want both?
Okay.
All right. Any objections?
No.
No. Whether anybody objected to the creation of this entity as described. We have 2 different things. We have the commission and the entity, ratepayer, advocate, IG, et cetera. So if there's no objection to that, then we don't have to debate whether this should be created or not. I think we've been hearing that loud and clear. That's been in our committee meetings as well. Then we can turn to the commission as well after we figure out what the entity is, the name, and its responsibilities. I think the responsibilities as the CLA and CAO put forward are good. I certainly support the description of them. And we can go over that again if folks want to really dig into the detail of what those powers will be. If folks are comfortable, we don't have to do it again.
Okay. And then what would flow from that naturally would be the issue of whether or not we are in agreement that we want an inspector general separate and apart from a ratepayer advocate. And the reason I keep asking for a roll call on that is because we don't have any visual here, we only have audio. And I think if there's some question as to how we voted or who said what, I just want to make it easy to be able to decipher if somebody wants to go back and listen to this. So why don't I start over here with our energy and environment folks. So the question is whether we want to establish separate and apart from ratepayer advocate, an office of inspector general, or let me rephrase that, not a separate office, but a separate function.
Right.
All right, a separate function, functioning separately from the ratepayer advocate. And Madam Clerk, would you mind doing the
Before that just becomes the only question, if you don't mind, Madam Chair. So the CLA may be able to best describe what is before us. And I don't know if any members have any questions about what that is, okay? Just because this is very important, I think it's before we rush to a vote, and I think we agree on this, Ms. Perry. So the question of the responsibilities of an inspector general-like thing that has a ratepayer advocate in it is what you have advocated, correct?
Yes, if I'm interpreting what Ms. Perry is putting forth properly, it would be the charter would require the establishment of the inspector general, whatever you call it, and within the inspector general, the charter would require that they have the ratepayer advocate function in it.
Correct, and that's what, but beyond also what she's suggesting, that's what you have described in your report, correct?
Exactly.
Okay. So is everybody clear on that and
No.
okay with that?
I'm not clear
Okay.
on that.
Let's go over it again.
The Office of Inspector General be an office funded.
No, it's fine, yeah.
And within that office, there would be a ratepayer advocate component. Is that a person or a component?
It would, well, it would be a function headed by a person. I don't think it would be a single person. It would be a ratepayer advocate function that the charter will require be included within that inspector general function.
So it's a function,
Yes,
not a person.
correct. And then as the budget is
I
developed.
mean, that's really very different. I mean, I think that's very different. I think a component, a function is very different than a person who is a ratepayer advocate. So I don't know what
Well, the charter could also, if you would like, it could also specify that an individual be designated as the ratepayer advocate. That could be fine.
That's what everybody wants.
I mean, I'd rather see that office have Inspector General, ratepayer advocate as sort of co-warriors in the same battle, rather than a component or a function. I think that diminishes the idea of ratepayer advocate, to make it a function or a component versus an actual position. I'd rather see, and I don't even know if they can coexist, can they? In the same office?
I actually viewed it in an opposite way. The advocate is a person. I mean, an advocate is a person.
Yeah.
A component gives me the impression it's more than just one person. That it's a part of the office, but that it's not just a person. But I recommend that we specify that that there be a designated ratepayer advocate who could be easily identifiable to the ratepayers.
I think so too. I mean, that's what I heard when we went around the city. I didn't hear a need for a component or a function in an office.
Well, I think a component just implies support staff and.
I heard a ratepayer advocate as a real live person that would advocate on behalf of the ratepayers of Los Angeles.
That's what the functions say. Yeah.
It seems to me that this is getting a little overly prescriptive for purposes of a charter amendment. What we're saying simply, if I'm understanding it, is that there will be an independent office. In that office, there will be a variety of functions. The functions will include analyzing the economics of the department and advocating for reduced rates or maintaining rates, and there will also be an investigative function which will involve having free access to the actions of the department and ensuring a degree of transparency, which would be more the Inspector General kind of function. But there has to be, in my view,
one other, which is customer service, as defined in there too.
It's sort of the ombudsman kind of function as well. But there's a person who's going to be the head of that. There's going to be a person who gets selected who is going to be held accountable for those functions. That's inherent in having an office, that there is going to be a single person. So I don't think the charter should define the organizational chart of that department or that office. It should simply say, this is the office, this is how it's selected, this is how it maintains its independence, and here's its functions.
Honestly, I don't feel that's what the people wanted. That sounds bureaucratic to me.
I mean, you make a very good point. I think it should be one person. It should be, this is me now speaking, not outlining issues. If we have an Inspector General and a ratepayer advocate, it may get somewhat complicated. I mean, I'm open to it, and definitely listen, colleagues, of how that might be envisioned. I think that person should be one in the same,
That person is essentially the public's advocate.
Well, if it's a woman, she can multitask, but
What would be the problem with just presenting the items on the ballot as ratepayer advocate, and then separately, or is it one package? Is it?
We have the freedom to define however we want.
No, I'm just saying, I think the voters would support each one, and then the question of how you put it together, we can answer later.
Well, I think the reason we made this recommendation is because if you have a ratepayer advocate, it's a person that you go to when you have concerns about your rates, which was the original intent. But like in everything else, if I'm the ratepayer advocate and I start seeing a pattern of complaints, then that will trigger a need for an investigation on a systemic level to identify what systemically is occurring to generate a series of complaints, maybe from one part of town over a particular kind of usage or whatever that is. So the idea here was to not limit the ratepayer advocate to simply responding to individual cases, but also empower that individual to look at a pattern and to look at larger systemic problems and provide a series of recommendations and analysis and reports that from those individual cases also provide systemic solutions to address them, not just for those people who called, but for the entire organization. And so in some ways, by having a larger office, you're strengthening that person's authority to provide
Yeah, I'd rather see it be the ratepayer advocate, and then within that office be the functions of what Miguel just described.
I think.
But I still
got
think
the same thing.
I think we're all saying the same.
I think people are wanting us to have a ratepayer advocate. If we haven't gotten that message, I don't know what.
I don't know why we're debating this. Make it two people. There's plenty of money within the cap you've established. Make it two people with two separate functions. And what you call the office, I don't think is relevant, really.
I agree.
Get the two positions that do the two things. That's what people want.
I just think, I think people are going to be disappointed if we put on the ballot an office with functions.
Yeah, I heard, what I heard in the meetings I attended was people want both. They see the value of both. So, and we can call them, puppy dog, what's your committee?
Puppy dogs and apple pie.
Puppy dogs and apple pie. I don't care what you call them. If they have the defined functions, that's what people wanted. And so make it two people, two identified functions, separate from each other.
So it would say, should the city of Los Angeles have a inspector general and a ratepayer advocate? That's how you're.
Or an office of inspector general, which would include a ratepayer advocate. Something like that.
Just give them one choice, up or down.
Yeah. Don't split it.
Yeah. Yeah, I would want to keep it together.
That's the package. That's the recommendation. That's what we heard from the community.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing.
So Give me the language that you just said.
Well,
Shall
if
the
I can
city-
take another stab at it, because I think everybody's pretty much saying the same thing here.
Yeah.
The charter should not dictate the organizational chart of this office. The charter should simply say there will be an Office of Ratepayer Advocate or an Office of Inspector General. We haven't settled on what the name is. The Office of Public Advocacy, whatever you want to call it. And it will have these functions, which will be performed by that person who's in that office. And how we staff that and who gets responsibility for which functions within that office can be left to the implementing ordinances. That shouldn't be part of the charter. The charter should simply define what the functions are of this Office of Public Advocacy.
I'm not so sure I like the word advocacy, but
Whatever it is.
public interest or something like that, with these two functions operating under that guise. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you did that with that language, I mean, it could be the office, what did you just say, public?
Public, what did I say? Public interest.
Public interest.
could be
The description would
accountability,
say
it could
there
be
would be a
whatever.
ratepayer advocate, and there would be inspector
Right.
general responsibilities that they would have to.
Okay, can we get back to Mr.
I think I'd move that if that's.
Mr. Miller?
Office of Public Interest? That
Okay.
the hell is that?
Why don't we go back to Mr. Miller just to go through proposed description? Maybe if you could synthesize if you could, proposed description, if it's not called the Office of Ratepayer Advocate, maybe it's the Office of Accountability, whatever you want to call it, but delineate for us how that would read and what in functions it would include. Because that's what we're going to vote on today.
Can I just make a point of clarification?
One point of clarification
Yeah,
for
just
Mr. Alcon before
very
you
quickly,
start.
Mr., holy cow, I'm losing my mind here. Miguel.
Miller.
Mr.
Santana.
The guy on the right, will you answer that?
The guy usually on my right. You said that the ratepayer advocate would focus on complaints related to rates. And I just want to clarify that it goes far beyond that. It's relative to service, consumerism, all kinds of issues.
I was using that as an
But-
example. That's
Yeah, but I just want to clarify that it's not just about rates. It's
Right.
about whatever people want to complain about, he or she would be the advocate.
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, fine.
All right, I think to summarize or wrap this up, what I'm hearing for drafting purposes is the charter will say, shall the Department of Water and Power, shall the city create within the Department of Water and Power an Office of Public Accountability, which shall include a ratepayer advocate and inspector general function.
Don't say function. Which shall include a
ratepayer
ratepayer advocate and inspector general.
Okay.
Inspector general powers.
They shall have, and then paraphrase some of
I'll
what's
move
in here.
Mr. Miller's
Most of this
words.
should be the implementing ordinance, paraphrase it, they should have access to all information, et cetera, and that and then the budget process.
And that hits the heart, I think, of what we're trying to get, which is accountability.
Yeah.
Right.
And then
And
some
Mr.
ratepayer
Smith has
advocate.
proposed
Transparency,
a
yes.
title called
Ratepayer accountability. It
Office
was
of
almost the same thing.
Ratepayer Accountability.
Yeah.
Office of, from Mr. Smith.
Well, like GAO, Government Accountability Office, it's a ratepayer accountability office. RAO, something like that.
All right, so why
So
don't
would it
we,
be the
again,
aura then?
if we can go through,
Would it be the aura, Mr.
But
Smith?
we don't talk about how these people get
no, that comes into the implementing language.
gonna be-
All right, so why don't we go through this per person,
Right,
Madam
sorry.
Clerk?
The accountability.
Okay, Madam Clerk, did you get that? And so then let's go through that. Did you get what
Mr. Miller said.
Mr. Miller said, how the Office of Ratepayer Accountability would be defined? If not, we'll have him say it again for the record.
We got to change that.
I'll get it
Sounds
later.
like we're holding the
No. He said it differently. He said it better, don't worry.
Yeah.
It's an Office of Public Accountability.
All right, you want an Office of Public
Is that what
Accountability?
you called it?
I said Office of Public Accountability, I just threw it out, but
Right.
yeah.
Great.
We're
So it's
going to
open instead
hold
of
the
oral.
public accountable.
With a ratepayer advocate. That's,
Okay.
I'll move approval on that little section of that. Okay? Okay. So should we just go through that? I think we did.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's go to the commission.
Just so, for purposes of being
Yeah.
consistent, though, I think we got to do the voice vote.
Sure. go
'Cause
ahead.
that's what we've done each time. All right, go ahead.
Council Councilmember Perry?
Aye.
Councilmember Alarcon?
We're removing a general manager.
No, we're not.
It's a council member
The
accountability.
Office of Accountability with Ratepayer Advocate
Yeah, I'll support it in committee, but can we
and
find a better name?
Inspector General.
Two people.
I'll support it for the purpose of moving this on, but can we find a better name?
Yeah, I agree.
You don't like Office of
I don't-
Public
We'll move it for now,
Accountability?
guys. Between now and council, we invite you to come up with
All
better
right, you
names,
can have a
absolutely.
contest for the best name or something like that, and we'll give you a prize.
Members of the public are invited to chime in with their suggestions between now and council, too.
Okay, Mr. Alarcon's voting aye in committee. Mr. Alarcon?
Yeah, I like to. Pardon me?
Did you want to say anything else? Did you cast your vote?
No, I'm fine.
Okay, he's fine. All right, Mr. Retz.
Councilmember Krikorian?
He's gone.
Councilmember Garcetti?
Aye.
Councilmember Hahn?
You know, if this is all that's, if it's all that's before me, but I don't really like creating an office. And I think we should think about that, members, because it sounds like we're creating a department, an office. And I will tell you, in this time of bad economics, people may vote down an office where if we, I don't know why we can't just say, can't we have an inspector general and a ratepayer advocate?
Oh, the people's office.
Why can't we still just say, should the city have an inspector general and a ratepayer advocate?
The most important thing here, colleagues, is actually the description of what it does. If I can, so I hear that loud and clear. People can vote however they want, but we just want to be clear. What we're moving here is also that the office would have the authority to audit and review programs at DWP, investigate complaints of abuse, fraud, or waste of DWP resources, recommend policies or actions to promote efficiency,
Okay,
and provide analysis.
If that's all that's before me, I'm going to vote yes. Yes, I'm voting yes.
And that's what is that? Are you voting aye?
I know. Stop.
To make it stop.
You
Just
have
make
it.
the screaming stop. All right, so Ms. Hahn is an aye vote?
Yes.
All right.
Okay.
All right, we
For
have
the
everyone?
commission.
All right, now we're going to get into,
Composition.
Mr. Smith, did you have any comments you wanted to make about board
God,
composition?
no.
Okay, great. That's really good. All right, Mr. Smith, Mr. Santana, do you want to add anything?
Mr. Miller?
Whoa, sorry. Okay, yeah, Mr. Miller or Mr. Santana?
I think, as I understood a comment that Mr. Garcetti was making earlier, the intent on option 2 was really to mirror option 1 in terms of the potential involvement in neighborhood councils, whether it be nominated or whether it be elected or however you choose to involve them if you do. The intent of those was to be the same. That wasn't expected to be different. So.
And specific to option 3, the idea behind that was to really make it a much more independent body, so that requiring there being some level of consensus on the removal of appointees, giving each party its ability to appoint, and even giving the commission itself the ability to make recommendations of a 5th appointment. But the idea here was to create some cohesiveness and some professionalism among the commission itself. And that's why it probably provides the greatest level of independence.
Okay.
So, Ms. Perry, to that, now that we've explained it, I think one of the things we talked about is having requirements placed on the people that are serving, and that is a brilliant idea that really, I think, will bring expertise to this board. To do that and have a really robust selection of people, you probably need to go to the 7 members, which is what you were proposing, to have that kind of representation for so many sectors of our community, including the neighborhood council then at that point. Yep.
Any other comments about going up to 7? Mr. Alarcon?
Just on the question of neighborhood council members, I truly believe that neighborhood council members are elected officials, and I don't think we should put them on the board. Just my comment.
Okay. Mr. Krikorian?
Yeah, I don't think the suggestion is to actually necessarily put a neighborhood council member on the board, but to have the neighborhood councils participate in the selection of the board members, so in some way, in the same way that...
Well, we have to come up with that, but first, I think what Ms. Perry is saying is if there's no objection to the expansion of 7, we start with a number, we'll dig into details as we go.
All right, again, for purposes of consistency, again, Madam Clerk, so the issue before us is whether we go to 7 board member composition.
Just read the last names fast.
Yes, it's the expansion of the number of board members from 5 to 7.
All right, go ahead.
Roll
Okay.
call.
Roll call.
Quickly.
Councilmember Perry?
Aye.
Councilmember Alacon? Councilmember Krikorian?
Councilmember Krikorian? Aye. He said aye.
Councilmember Garcetti?
Aye.
Councilmember Hahn?
Aye.
All right, thank you. Next point. All right, so we've disposed of that issue.
Which I know for the report kind of makes all the suggestions moot since they were all for 5, right? All option 1, 2, and 3, doesn't make them moot, but
It doesn't make 'em
it wouldn't give the detail of all 7 now if we were at 7, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So we have to figure that out, colleagues. I'm just pointing that out.
Yeah.
And then one of the other things that was in all 3 was to establish the term at either 3 or 5 years. And I don't know if folks have particular opinions about 3 or 5
Yeah.
years for the board members.
I think I would like to propose that we limit them to 3 years with the possibility of renewal or continuity. And I don't like term limits, and I certainly want to be consistent. In what I say about even the positions that we hold, is I think that institutional memory, there's a lot to be said for that, and people can be pulled off if we go through this reform package. So,
I'd support that too,
yeah.
3 years.
3 years.
What exactly are we trying to fix on that one? What do we think is broken with the 5 years?
Well, we had one letter, right, that was written to us about expanding to 5 years. Is that the?
There was some suggestion, I believe there was one letter, actually there was a suggestion to increase them to 7 years, and I don't recall by whom. I think part of the discussion behind this is in an attempt to expand the pool of candidates that are actually willing to serve. I mean, this is a very busy, unpaid 5-year commitment, and I think there was some discussion about whether having a shorter commitment would make, and particularly now, where you're getting people from, specific walks of life with specific experience, the goal would be to try to expand the candidate pool of people willing to make a 3-year commitment rather than a 5 or 7 year.
Right. No, I think 3 years, again, it's unpaid, it's volunteer, it's complex work. This is not a lighthearted commission. So I'm going to stick with 3 years with the possibility of renewal. Anybody else want to weigh in on that? Mr. Alarcon?
My concern is the institutional wisdom, and I think we lose some value if we have short terms of 3 years. 3 years fly by in 3 years. But I just think that I don't think it's going to make a huge difference. And I think it gives the public the appearance we're changing something, but I don't know exactly. I'm where Ms. Hahn is. I don't know what problem we're trying to fix by going from 5 to 3. The recommendation, I believe, came from Chemerinsky and Kiefer, but
Can I give an argument for 3? Because I support it. What I would
sure
say.
you can, but I just want to say that I think 5 years. Why did we create 5 years in the first place?
Yeah.
What was the reason there's probably a good reason to go to 5 years when we went there. Does anybody know what it is? The reason to go, why we have 5 years to begin with?
I do not know why the drafters of the new charter picked 5 years. I'm sorry.
And some of those drafters, when they wrote the letter, now said 7 years.
So it's the new charter that created 5 years?
I don't know.
The charter that went into effect in 99, yeah.
What was it before?
I would have to check. I'm
You
sorry,
see
I
how
don't
quickly
recall.
people forget? It's that institutional memory.
Anybody in the audience? No? Anybody remember?
Anybody was around
All right.
when they wrote the charter?
Well, here's the three argument for me, Mr. Alacon, is that, I've been here, this is beginning of my 10th year here. I've seen, I think, 2 votes against a commission or nomination in my entire time here. So folks are saying, well, why don't we have the backbone, like Ms. Hahn was just saying a few minutes ago, to sometimes vote against nominees put forward by the mayor? Well,
Who's the other one?
you vote against? No, so maybe then there's been 3. There was a police commissioner that was nominated that 2 council members at a period when you weren't on the council voted against.
I know who that was.
Yes, and the argument is that after 3 years, we then have some accountability to see, okay, is somebody not doing much? If you wait 5 years, they're there for a long time. After 3 years, you can say, okay, let's assess whether these are commissioners that are adding value or doing something. So, I mean, that's why I personally support it. I don't, Ms. Perry can speak for herself too, but.
I agree. I mean, we've had a horrible experience with the redevelopment agency, and, it's nearly paralyzed us, and I don't certainly want to repeat that scenario over it. If we're going to go through some changes here at the Department of Water and Power, I want to be able to build in that flexibility so that if things aren't going well, we don't have to endure it for 10 years, and not be able to get any work done.
I mean, the only thing I would say is I think 5 years was a little bit for institutional memory, a little bit about expertise, a little bit about continuity, a little bit about giving, it's so late, I'm losing my word, the bond raters, the idea that we have consistency in the governance of this utility. I think the idea of every 3 years gives a little bit of inconsistency or instability. And I will say, except for the ones, we're looking to bring more expertise on this commission, but I will tell you, being a volunteer, non-paid person, there is a lot to learn when you sit on a commission like a DWP. And I think changing that out every 3 years, I'm not sure what kind of a message that would send to the folks who are looking at our consistency, reliability, and sustainability. So I'm not a big in favor of changing them out every 3 years.
We can have a split vote.
Okay.
Okay.
We're going to stagger them?
And the
By the way,
terms
it's not
should be
3 and out.
staggered.
It's 3 and a renewal. So
3 and a renewal.
It's just our check after 3 years to have a check,
Yeah.
but it doesn't say you can't serve for more than 3.
Yeah, there's no ban on serving a second 3-year term. So, if people are satisfied, person will get nominated for another 3-year term.
Okay.
And the terms should be staggered. So, does that help?
That helps.
Okay, great.
Back everything
So,
I said.
can Madam Clerk, can we restate that again? We're talking about 3-year terms, possibility of renewal, terms are staggered.
How many times can they be renewed?
There's no limit. We're not having term limits on this. So if they're good, they're good.
And currently?
There's no term limits.
There's no term limits?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Is there any?
We voted on that already. Okay, go ahead.
Councilmember Perry?
Aye.
Councilmember Alarcon? No?
We couldn't hear you. Would you like me to hold the mic for you?
Why don't you use a mic? Just
Try the mic. Shall I hold that for you?
I said no.
Councilmember Alarcon votes no. Councilmember Garcetti?
Yes.
And Councilmember Hunt?
I think I'm going to vote no.
Okay, did we lose Mr. Krikorian?
Yes.
Okay, we lost him. Okay. Great. All right. All right. So let's see. The next issue on the deck is, I believe, the...
Well, there's appointment, who appoints them, and then the expertise, if we wanted to add any
the expertise.
kind of quotas.
City
Yes,
attorney?
Mr.
Just
City
so it's
Attorney.
clear, the one-to-one vote means that it moves forward without recommendation from the EE.
For both, yeah. We do have a quorum still in rules and elections, but there's no majority opinion, and there's no quorum or majority opinion from E&E.
So it's recommendation from both chairs, correct?
Correct.
Okay, great. All right, are people prepared to talk about expertise, composition of the board?
Let's do it.
Okay. Mr. Smith, I know you had some specific thoughts on that. Would you mind
Tell us.
kicking off the conversation on that?
I'm
We're
sorry,
talking
I was
about
talking about-
expertise and composition.
Yeah, and that's going to be probably the hard issue, and I was just talking to Mr. Dean about that. We have to have a broad list. We can't say you have 7 positions and 7 people have to do these functions, because it can be very hard to find that expertise. So I think we should have a list that you can pick from and say you need to find some of these people on that commission. And you can't say we have to have one person that's environment, one that's business, one that's so-and-so. It may be impossible to do. And then if you haven't decided yet, if you're coordinating between the mayor and the council, how do you do that coordination even? So I would just, throw out there, I think we need to find a representative list of what the city of LA is, and say that you have to try and find a way to fill those holes. You can't have more than 2 people doing one of them, for instance, and that would be one way to kind of force the decision makers that are making the appointments to find people in those other categories. And I'm open to discussion. I'm not here saying this is the way to do it. I'm saying here's the hurdles that we got to overcome.
Do you think it's inclusive enough to say that we're looking for individuals who have utility experience, which may include water and power and renewable, municipal finance, someone with a labor background? And I think in all of these categories, it should be noted that they cannot have a conflict professionally with anything they're engaged in, nor should they be able to enjoy any particular benefit professionally by being a part of this membership or board membership. So we'll have to be extremely careful. And I guess we'll have to lean on the CLA in terms of helping us craft that language, because there is a potential for conflict here.
Yes. We don't want another airport situation.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
So
that's right.
That's kind of the challenge to you, is how do you draft that language that encompasses the idea that we want to be representative of the community of the city, and at the same time understand you have to have flexibility to make that work. But you also have to protect us against conflict of interest.
Depending on who the appointing authority is, this is an easier undertaking, and not, if it's a split appointment and some come from, or split into multiple pieces, if the mayor does some and the council president does some and others do some, getting all your categories ticked off is tougher than if it's one person who says, okay, I got to find one person from this category, one person from that category, one person from that category. So that's just something to consider, and it's part of the reason. And I'll just be upfront about this. I lean more towards what you envisioned with option 1, and the reasons why. I mean, obviously, if thought selfishly, council president or whoever succeeds me, there's going to be council president. Could actually appoint that, and you'd say, oh, why shouldn't we have that power? For me, the charter works best and is ideal when there's accountability. Now, accountability isn't guaranteed when one person is the appointing authority, because you can have somebody who checks out or doesn't have his commissioners or her commissioners do the right thing. We could hypothetically experience that. But you have a better chance of success when there is that accountability and a check on that through our confirmation process. You also have a better chance of getting these categories checked off. I probably, or maybe a minority vote on this, but that's my sense. That's what the Charter Reform Commissions, I know, wanted to set up, that ultimately, I wouldn't want to set up something where it's a permanent standoff. And take away that it's this council again, and take away that it's this mayor. But if you have diffuse power and it's like 2 come from one place and feel loyal to that person, and 2 come from this person loyal to that person, how do we move this entity forward? It's good for checks on making sure some bad things don't happen. It's not good for making positive things move forward, though, too. Just look to Sacramento and a 2/3 vote, for instance, for evidence of that.
I move that 4 of the members have no expertise.
Okay, thank you very much.
Can I get a second?
No. No second.
No second on that.
Wrong committee, you can't second it.
I'm not kidding.
I know you're not kidding. That's what's scary. Thank you. All right, so can we, Mr. Smith, just to get your input one more time on this. So we're talking about categories. Mr. Miller, in your estimation, can we put together, can you give me some language right now so that we could vote on establishing the broad categories of membership on this newly configured board? I just want to make sure that I'm on point. If we want to break it down by water, power, and renewable, municipal finance, labor representative, can you help me fill in the blanks a bit on that?
Well, I think I need a little more clarification about precisely what the proposal is. If I'm understanding correctly, it's not designating that a certain number from certain areas. but that it be a commission of 7 members now, which I believe that you've already voted on. And those members must have expertise in the following areas. Water and power, utility management and policy experience, green power. I'm going to have to work on the language. It's been a long day.
Yeah, I would say renewable.
Renewable.
Yeah, because it's more inclusive.
You've expressed an interest in that labor is one of the
A
qualifications.
representative.
Representative.
I talked to Mr. Smith, and he
Sure.
gave a good perspective on that.
There's been suggestions that small
somebody who is
business.
from the community, but would not be in a situation that would put them in conflict.
Correct. Small business owners. I'm going to have to give some thought to sort of the laundry list, but I think we can work with you and come back with something to present to you when you give the instruction that would include that.
Okay, well then why
Madam Chair, why don't we just, I mean, it's your committee, but I was going to suggest, why don't you just instruct them to come back with the language?
That's what I was about to do. All right, so if I'd like to make a motion to instruct the chief legislative analyst to come back to, do you want them to come back to committees or just come straight to council?
We'll bring it straight to council.
All right, we'll come back to city council with proposed language that indicates how the board would be composed according to category. Yes, Mr. Alarcon.
In addition to that, you should come back with a suggestion of who appoints which one. So if you have a category for labor, is the mayor or the president of the council?
That's a fine idea, but why don't we have them come back with the language as to how it's composed or comprised, and then the second part of that, and maybe you'll want to second my motion, and then I'll second yours.
I second your motion.
All right, Mr. Alarcon seconded my emotion. Thank you.
If I could, I think that Mr. Garcetti, I don't know that the question has been resolved yet about who's going to be, whether it's a mayor
I'm trying to
appointee or
make them
split
two
appointees.
separate. I'm trying to make them two separate issues. I
Right.
want them to be two separate issues because I don't want to get caught up on the weeds right now about.
Weeds, we're not on the marijuana.
No, we're not on marijuana anymore, no. But I don't want to get caught up in the minutia. I want Mr. Garcetti's portion of this to be separate, so you can come back to us with language on how the board is to be composed.
Yes.
And then the part that goes with that, the companion to that is, and how they get there. Okay?
Sure.
So,
So just, sorry, I was
two-part
thinking,
instruction.
so what's the motion before us that you made that Mr. Alarcon seconded?
So what, I didn't make him, he did it on his own.
No, that you made and that he seconded.
Okay.
I didn't say
You don't
made
make
him.
Richard Alarcon do anything. Anyway, my motion was to instruct the chief legislative analyst to come back to the full city council with proposed ballot language that defines categories of board membership, and the separate but companion piece to that is, and the process by which they get there, or how they
Now I
achieve.
assume part of that, at least on the second, you want some policy direction too.
Yes.
So we can say you just think about it, or else, we do the thoughts and we vote on it, and it's okay to win and lose some of them, and I don't mind doing that. On the second piece, I'd rather not have just the CLA suggested. I put forward what my thought was on it, and it is a core piece. To me, it's not weeds at all. Like, who appoints this ultimately is a very, it may be the first most important question of what the commission is and how it's accountable. In terms of the composition as well, you may want some more guidance too, and if we don't have consensus on that, you may give us a menu of options when it comes back, that you could have one in which there's just a couple pieces of expertise.
Right.
Like for me, my personal prejudice, again, not prejudice, my personal opinion is that we should have it outlined that some people have some utility experience, one or two of them at least, but that we not necessarily microcraft every single seat in.
I think that's where I am. That's where I was hoping. I'm feeling like we're really backing ourselves into this board composition, which, again, city charter was really clear about citizen commissions being sort of that layer of people, between electeds and bureaucracy, and this really changes that. It also, as you said, if we get to the point that the mayor still appoints, you've really limited the mayor in terms of his or her agenda for policy issues for DWP. So, again, I spoke earlier, many hours ago, that I did think it would be nice to have someone with knowledge of water and then power. But in terms of all the other ones, I really think you're losing that idea of real, just average citizens. Not that any of them are really average, but being on this commission. So I would like to see two sets of language come back.
Well, one way of looking at it could be to establish general qualifications, and certainly because the field of energy is moving so rapidly, there could be new sources of energy in the next 20 years that we don't even consider viable today.
Cold fusion is right around the corner.
Exactly. So I think the thinking was that there's recommending some general qualifications, and the more detailed version of that would come as...
Okay, well, we voted on that part already. Okay, so that part's been voted on. So what we're talking about now is how we get there.
Can I make a motion that maybe out of 7, 3 or 4 have to meet one of those criteria, and then leave 3 just to the whim of the mayor?
Why don't we, why don't we do that on the council floor when he brings back the language, so we have something more specific to examine? Unless, I mean, what do you mean, who? Who what?
I'll second that.
Okay.
We can put it in the rules and elections or whatever, it doesn't matter.
All right, Mr. Garcetti seconded Ms. Han's motion. All right, so let's vote on it. Madam Clerk?
This is just that 4 members of a 7-member commission have expertise in, we list the categories.
So to be clear, what you're asking is that what I'm going to come back with is a list of qualifications that reflect the city of Los Angeles, and then the requirement will be that 4 of the 7 meet one of these
I
qualifications.
don't think she said of the city of Los Angeles. You weren't talking about the categories of like a baker, a shoemaker, and all those things. You're talking about that they have utility experience.
Utility, water, power, business, environmental.
Yeah, I'm sorry, yes.
Finance.
Yeah.
All right, now, just for the record, again, I want to go through a voice vote. Ms. Hahn, I have to apologize to you in advance. I'm going to vote no on that
Okay.
now. I'm going to be Richard Alarcon for a second.
That's okay.
Vote no. All right,
That's
so,
okay.
I like that. Okay, Madam Clerk?
There's only one Richard.
Don't apologize.
Okay, this vote is to instruct the CLA to report to council with proposed language indicating how the board will be composed by category, and that 4 of the 7 members should meet certain qualifications that will be outlined at a later time.
All right, before we take a vote on that, Mr. Garcetti, you had an issue that you've now tied to Ms. Hahn's motion. Is that what you want to do?
No. The composition we should do, I agree with you, we should vote on that next.
Okay, so the first vote should be to instruct the CLA to report to council with proposed language indicating how the board will be composed by category, whether energy, power, renewable.
We already voted on that.
Okay.
So the next issue is how they are brought to the board, how are they appointed to the board?
Okay, and the next one, a vote will be how the process of which the board members will be appointed, whether it's who will do the appointing. Is that
The motion should state, instruct the CLA to come back to full city council with language indicating a process by which board members will be appointed to, through what process members will be appointed to the 7-member board. Is that correct, Mr. CLA?
I'm sorry, Ms. Perry, on this I do need some more guidance. We do have, we had an option with joint appointments for 5 members. The simplest thing to do would be 3 council president, 3 mayor, and 1 rotating, all confirmed by the council.
And then is that
so there
an
are
option?
there's
Is
a
that
variety of
option
options.
Option 3?
No, option 2.
Option 2.
That was like 2.
Okay.
But rather 2, 2, and 1. It's 3, 3, and 1. We could do that, but I need some sense of where you would like to hit on this.
After we do Did we take that vote already?
Yeah, we
that
already
last one?
took the
Okay, so-
category, so then,
The category vote.
So for me, I would, in this new 7-person one, keep the 7 with the mayor. So it'd be more like 1.
okay.
Item number 1. Number 2, if we reconstitute this, item 1 would be keep them with the mayor with approval by council. 2 would be 3, 3, 1. And if you wanted to mirror this, option 3 would be 3 and 3, with the last one being appointed by those 6. But
Well, as I said earlier,
I don't think
I was
three's alive.
going to stick with option 2.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to deviate from option 2.
And what about my motion on the?
We're going to vote on yours next.
Okay.
I want to vote on the process. All right, so then what we have before us is the language contained in option 2 as to process, which is on page number...
Page 4
Yeah,
at the
page
bottom.
number 5.
5.
No, it would be page 4 at the bottom, rather than the
Yeah, here it
first
is,
bullet.
first paragraph under option 2.
Right.
All right, so we'll put that to a vote, and that says designate 2 board commission appointments to the mayor, designate 2 board commission appointments to the council president, and designate 1 board commissioner appointment to the mayor and council president on a rotating term basis.
That would be changed to 3, 3, and 1 with a 7-member board.
All right, 3, 3, and 1 with a 7-member board. All right, so then the instruction is to, Mr. Alarcon, before we vote, you have a comment, question?
I just have a question. If we're going to a rotating system and a renewal comes up, who appoints?
Well, if it's a resignation during a term, it would be the same appointing authority to the end of the term.
That's too easy, Jerry. When they finish their term and they're up for renewal, who appoints?
It would rotate.
Depends on if
So
you're
they're-
the odd number of the street or the evening number of the street.
Yeah, that's...
And you can water on
It would
Tuesday,
rotate.
Thursday,
If it's the
Friday,
rotating
and
appointment at the end of
the
the
new
3-year
commissioner
term,
on
if it was a council
Monday.
president appointment, then the mayor would get to appoint, and they could reappoint or they could replace.
Except on Monday.
Okay? All right, so we're talking about a 7-member board, 3, and 1, appointing authority. So Madam Clerk, can you get up and do a voice vote on that, please?
Can we do the 2 motions simultaneously? So
Well, wait,
mine is,
Okay, let's
could
vote
you-
on...
so you have 1 and I have 1. Yours is to
Mine-
support
mine's
2 and mine is to
option
support
2.
1
Yeah.
as reconstituted.
All right, so then why don't you state Mr. Garcetti's first, and let's vote on that, and then separately vote on option 2.
Or it might be easiest, Ms. Perry, people can just say 1 or 2, you know?
Okay.
Which one they support. Whatever you want, okay.
Let's be consistent. Okay.
Okay, so this is the vote on option number 1. Councilmember Perry?
No.
Councilmember Alarcon?
I'm confused.
Wait, that's 2, 2, and 1?
No, they would, option 1 is it would stay with the mayor, and then it would be, stay the way it is, mayor appoints, council approves.
So you're not talking about expertise on this?
No, this is just how they get appointed.
I've got this option 1.
Okay, so that's
Okay.
Councilmember Alarcon?
I'm not here.
Oh,
Yeah, you
I
are.
want to vote on that.
What?
You can't abstain.
No, you can't abstain.
Then I'll leave. I don't want to vote on
Why don't you want to vote?
it. I just don't want to vote.
Why?
okay. Councilmember Alarcon is absent.
Aye.
Councilmember
You
Garcetti?
can't come back, though.
Okay, again.
This is on option 1.
Aye.
It's yes. And Councilmember Hahn?
Yes.
Okay.
You can come.
No, it's all right, let him stay out there. All right, now we go to option 2.
This is the vote on option 2, which is the 3 appointed by the mayor, 3 by the council president, and 1 is rotating. Councilmember Perry?
Aye.
Councilmember Alarcon is absent. Councilmember Garcetti?
No.
No. Councilmember Hahn?
No.
No.
Okay. All right, what else do we have to vote on today?
Have we voted on the 4?
No, we got to vote on that.
I think you need to vote on the
Oh, yeah, Ms.
removal.
Hahn has a motion on the table. I'm
Mr.
sorry.
Perry wants to vote no on it.
What?
You want to vote no on it?
Okay, why don't you restate the motion?
Yes,
so
the
clerk-
motion is that out of 7 members of the commission, 4 would have to have a certain expertise.
Yes, I believe you voted on that, and that my instructions will come back next
Did we?
week with
we
with
voted
that
on that.
language.
He's coming back with language, and you sort of modified our request.
Yes, that we come back with you with a proposed list of board member qualifications, and 4 members of that 7-member board will have to meet those qualifications, if I'm understanding correctly.
Okay. We don't have to, I think it was a motion and second. We're not voting on it?
I support it for the record.
Okay. And why don't we go
You're
through?
just going to come back, you're just going to bring that back.
Should we just keep it consistent?
What we'll bring back is the
Yeah.
proposed list
Okay.
for your
Yeah, just let's be
consideration.
consistent for the record, please.
Yeah.
Please, Madam Clerk?
The vote is on, the CLA will report back with a list of qualifications, and 4 out of the 7 board members should meet those qualifications.
Okay,
Councilmember Perry?
The reason that I am voting no is because I want to make sure that we have categories for all of the positions, not just 4 out of 4 out of 7. That's why I'm voting no. Okay.
All right.
Councilmember Alacon?
He's back.
The reason I'm voting no is because I don't think we should have categories on any of the
I
7
don't believe
positions.
we need editorializing on all these votes. I can't believe I'm agreeing. The reason I'm voting yes is
Because I made the motion.
Councilmember Garcetti?
Yes.
Councilmember Hahn?
yes, and the reason is, it makes sense. It's a good idea.
Okay.
Okay.
I think, colleagues, have we missed anything, Mr. Seela? Any
Yeah,
outstanding questions?
I think there are 2 other issues to
Okay.
vote on. One, the council's ability to remove board members with a 2/3 vote.
Correct.
The second issue would be the council's ability to overturn a mayoral removal by a 2/3 vote.
A mayoral what?
Removal.
Okay.
To veto a mayoral removal by a 2/3 vote and to remove a board member by a 2/3 vote.
Okay. I'm supportive of those motions.
Okay.
Anybody have objections?
Voice, just do a voice vote.
Okay.
Nobody can see us.
Okay.
Okay,
we'll
let's do that. Come on.
Councilmember Perry?
Aye.
Councilmember Alacon?
Sorry?
Perry, was it I vote?
Yeah.
Aye.
Councilmember Garcetti?
Aye.
Councilmember Hahn?
Yes.
Okay.
Is that on the? No, don't do that.
Okay. All right. Anything else, Mr. Seela, from that?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Do you want to go home now?
Yeah, but I would actually like to, I know we held it on the
What's
table, but on the,
For the rules and elections, yeah. Just, let's just make
Oh,
sure we're
that's-
fine. We're
oh,
done. So is there
that's
anything
right.
else with
I'm sorry.
DWP
That's
stuff?
just
We're all good? Okay. Thank you. We're good.
yes, going back to marijuana.
Thank you, Mr. The last question, yeah, you're right, that's a good point. I think we wanted to, we had talked about this, but I don't know if it requires a vote to separate out whatever we decide on the commission appointment, separate from the creation of Inspector General, ratepayer advocate piece. The CLA can give us suggestions about consolidation of the other ones, maybe, and I think that whether they're single ballot measure or multiple ones, but we will need to figure that out between now and council or take a vote on it now. Did you have any suggestion on topical consolidation?
We can certainly bring some of that back to you next week, but remember, the council still needs to ultimately instruct. So and then we'll give you some advice at that time about how we might package these, whether they're tax measures. So, certainly I would think the board reform, I would think the budget reform measures would be one ballot item. The budget reform measures would be one ballot item. I would recommend that the DBP reform measures be a ballot item. And then, depending upon what else is on, we'll need to come back with you for the final instruction on drafting, and we'll give you recommendations about how to package things.
I think within the reform ones, Ms. Perry and I would like to see at least separated out those two of how the board gets selected and the ratepayer. We want the ratepayer advocate IG thing to be an independent one.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
I want it to be so clearly delineated that somebody can look at it piece by piece by piece, see how it flows, and then make a decision as to whether or not they agree with it. So I don't want to mash it all together like a bowl of oatmeal, and then somebody thinks something else is going on. If we break it up, I think it'll be a lot easier for the voters to digest.
Sure. Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much. We'll
anything
continue
else?
rules on elections. And, yeah, Mr. Alacon?
I wanted to ask for reconsideration. No, I'm just kidding. I actually wanted to thank the staff and the committees for outreaching to the community, and I apologize. My schedule conflicted with every single one of them except for this one, so I wanted to commend the committees, both committees, and the staff for working with the community to come up with these proposals.
And thank you to Ms. Berry's staff for working with my staff on this as well, and the other council staffs. Thank you. I know it was a complicated piece, but...
Charles and Raphael. Charles and Raphael did a great job from the Chief Legislative Analyst's
But your staff
office.
did too.
Everybody, they all worked hard, and they were very patient.
Good. Okay, we've had some
City
very
Clerk's
patient
office, too.
planners and some very patient personnel folks. Ms. Hahn wanted to reconsider the two 6 and 7, just to be clear about what we were going to be moving forward. On 6 and 7, Ms. Hahn wanted to...
I think on 6, I do want to move it forward to the full city council for drafting for the March ballot.
Okay.
The tax, and I think I just want to work with you a little bit, see if we can come up with a better way to do it.
Sure.
Okay, and then on 7 is Prop 19?
Yes, 17 would be if Prop 19
Yeah, so I
passes.
think we wait on 7, and if Prop 19...
If need be, we can waive it out of committee. If it passes on the 2nd and you want to
Right.
consider something on the 3rd, we can waive it out of
Right.
committee to consider in council that
Right,
last
or
day.
we could always put it on the... we could always put it on the May ballot.
We can waive that out without a Rule 54 out of here, right?
Now, does the marijuana tax have to go to Budget and Finance?
Actually, I'll check with the clerk. I don't know whether it's been referred to Budget and Finance or not. If it hasn't been referred,
Okay.
Wait, which one is this?
I think they've been referred.
Wait.
Okay, we'll send it to council for consideration, so there's no elements. We may not wind up voting on it for the public on November 3rd. It's going to depend on what happens November 2nd, but we'll send them both
send
to
them both
council.
on. Yes, thank you.
If we can take up, I believe number 10 now has very little controversy, and I'm sorry to the planners who are here for number 9, which are almost there, but it looks like we've met and conferred on the issues having to do with the civilian employment provisions in the charter, that those have support from our union partners. Is that right, Ms. Wood? Come on, sit down, and thank you for your patience. You can be as brief as you want to, but it looks, I think we're familiar with what the issues are. There is support now for these items that are before us.
We just want to tell you that we did meet and confer with all of the unions that represent the majority of employees in the city, and that there is only one item to which they object, and I'll ask Raylan Napper to tell you about that one, and we have a recommendation about that.
So number 1 was withdrawn, is that right?
Yeah, number 1, mayor's authority to transfer employees.
Okay.
Several unions had objections to that. Other than that, there were no unions that had objections to any of the other items, with the exception, of course, of the fire department, which has 2 items, and they have to speak for themselves because we did not meet and confer on those.
Your objection is that they're not moving forward, not that they are moving forward?
The exemptions for...
Sorry.
I was just saying, we're not reporting on those.
No, I know, yeah. So tell us what those are.
The exemptions for the chief officers, the Chief Officers Association has met and conferred with the fire department. Those issues are resolved. However, the charter change issues for AB 220, the UFLAC does have some objections to those, and we're in the meet and confer process with them.
Number 10, okay. So is your recommendation to wait on that as well?
Yeah, I would.
We're going to have to work through them.
Okay, again, we have May ballot. On some of the ones that haven't moved forward, doesn't mean they're dead for us either, so please continue to, work. I know personnel has some feelings about that. We may not have unanimity, but we wanted to make sure there was meeting, conferring going on. If there is going to be a May ballot, we may consider these and may move them forward, even if there are some objections, but we'll try to work and see if we can get through those as well. So we'll take out number 1 and number 10 and move the others forward for a omnibus civilian employment provision change for the charter. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Civilian and sworn, excuse me. Yes.
Just to be clear for the record, in the last meeting, we removed 3, 4, and 6.
Correct. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm sorry, I should specify that. So really, it's now only 2, 5, 7, 8, 9, 11.
Correct.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
thank you. And thank you for patience. Next item, our last one, item number 9.
Hi, Ron.
Good evening.
Good evening, council members. Ken Bernstein, representing the Department of City Planning. We've distributed a report to the committee on the proposed charter amendment, and the department is, first of all, supportive of the intent of this amendment and appreciates that the proposal is supporting community plans, the value of community plans as a hallmark of long-range planning, creating greater clarity, certainty for community members and for applicants. And the proposed charter amendment is an endorsement of the value of community planning and long-range planning. However, the department does have some concerns that the proposed amendment, before moving forward, does require clarification in several key areas. One is the need for phasing of this proposal. Given the fact that 31 of the 35 community plans will, as of the spring of 2011, be more than 10 years old, we do not want to create a situation where all of those plans are immediately out of compliance. It would not be possible, obviously, to update all 31 of those plans simultaneously. Typically, the plans are on roughly a 3-year cycle to do all of the community outreach, environmental impact report, and other work to update those plans. So the department's proposal is to look at a phasing in of the charter requirement. We are suggesting that upon passage that there be a 7-year period to bring those 35 community plans initially up to date. That would still be a very aggressive schedule of adopting 5 community plans per year between 2011 and 2018, and after that point the plans would then be on a 10-year cycle. Secondly are the fiscal concerns. The charter amendment would create a substantial financial obligation. The cost of doing these community plans, it's important to remember that each of these is essentially a mini general plan for most small or medium-sized cities. Each of these are communities of, on average, 100, 150,000 people, and all of the work that is needed, the considerable staff time, overtime costs, public outreach, and environmental work. Typically, these would cost roughly $2 million or a little bit more, so the total cost for a 35 community plan program to bring all of these up to date could be roughly between $70 and $79 million over either a 7-year phase-in period or future 10-year period. While the department does have some support from a general plan maintenance fee, it's still likely that the bulk of that obligation would fall on the general fund. And then finally, just legal issues. The department will continue to be consulting with the city attorney to ensure that the proposed amendment does not create any additional legal risk. We raise this because the charter amendment would actually go beyond state law and would enshrine in the charter a presumption that's not found in state law that community plans might be considered out of date after 10 years. State law does not have such a presumption. And the concern would be that if there are community plans that have actually experienced very little change, we rely on those community plans to process individual applications in each of those areas, which have to demonstrate conformance with the general plan and by virtue of the general plan, the individual community plans. So that's an issue we also want to work very closely with the council and the city attorney on as this moves forward.
Thank you for that. And I know that we want to make sure that the last thing we want to do is saddle the planning department with an unfunded mandate that also opens us up to any liability issues. The flip side, though, is I feel very strongly that until we start putting something that obligates us to do this, there is really nothing that enshrines, even when we do have good leadership for a moment in time here or there, that these community plans will regularly be updated. And it's the greatest frustration I hear from constituents around the city who have different ideas of what their community should be, but It's that we're working on such outdated plans that everything is done in a discretionary way, or it feels like that. We know not everything is. And as such, it just seems like everything's about access. It feeds everybody's conspiracy theory about how planning gets done, rather than what we've tried to do, which is to do real planning, as we've talked about in this city, and to have some predictability so things are less discretionary. And I think that that's really, really important. The second piece of this is how would we fund it and how much is that? And certainly the timing of this is at the moment when we're in the biggest financial crisis we've faced, so we need to be able to do that in a way that's responsible. We could do that through fees, as you've mentioned, but we also want to keep our fees at a level that doesn't disincentivize the very development that we're seeking to plan for. But also, what is that number and how do we get that? My own calculations, and walk me through whether this is true or not, if we have about $2 million over a 3-year period, and if we were talking about, once we got to a 10-year cycle, doing about 3 of these a year, that would mean that the per year costs of each of these would be about $2 million? Is that correct? If we do 3 a year? Okay, I'll walk you through my calculation. So if it's $2 million about over 3 years, then it's approximately $666,000 per year for each plan.
Right, with 35 community plans, if we were on a 10-year cycle, obviously some years we'd have to do 3, some
so
years 4.
So at any given year, we're actually probably we're somewhere in the cycle with 9 of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's actually, so we'd be looking at about $6 million a year.
I think that's roughly
$6 to $7 million a year.
Right. So again, we suggest an initial phasing that perhaps to catch up, since the plans are already in most cases more than 10 years old, looking at perhaps a 7-year phase-in if the amendment took effect in 2011, that we would have an aggressive schedule of completing 5 plans per year between 2011 and 2018. That would be, for a 7-year schedule, though, roughly about a $10 million per year cost.
And if we look at the fees that we're collecting from the citywide plan update fees, how much is that a year?
I believe, and I'm not sure if this, we have CAO staff here, I believe it is about $1.8 million per year, what was anticipated from the general plan maintenance fee. However, the general plan maintenance fee doesn't only go to the community plans. That fee also is meant to support update of the general plan elements, including the housing element, which is a mandatory element that has to be updated every 5 years, as well as our transportation element, which is significantly out of date.
How long ago did we last update that?
1999 was the last update of the transportation.
But traffic hasn't really changed much since then. All right, just want to be clear. So for me, if we're going to meet a March deadline on this, we'll have to think quickly, and if we can't come up with something in which there's consensus in terms of the funding on this, I think we have to look at May. While I'd like for this to be on March, we will work together on this, and the CLA and the CAO in particular. I think a lot of us aren't huge fans of ballot box budgeting, but in some cases we do find that there are certain things that are important enough. Our library's motion, for instance, that we looked at, that is something that's in the charter and something that we're seeking to change in the charter. And this certainly isn't a lot of money. So I put that out there first. And I think the phasing in is a good way to go about. We might want to push out that schedule by a couple years just because of this budget crisis, to give us the confidence that if we started, a year or 2 later, that we're through a lot of this budget mess, and then we can do an accelerated, 7-year catch-up, and then 10-year cycle. But I do think it's a good way of getting the public back involved in planning directly, where they know that there'll be the resources in the planning department, and we won't fall into, and I hate to always throw out Hollywood, but Hollywood is the last one to be updated, and it has been, in my experience so far, we're entering the 10th year of my involvement in it as a council member. That's tough because a lot has changed from when we started that 10 years ago to even now. Things have changed in Hollywood very significantly, and we need that to reflect the values of the community and to have a real good public process, as great as it's been for the last 2 years. And I do want to thank the planning department for the folks that have been working on that. It's been done very well. But we see the list. The one last thing that was brought up, and I spoke with our planning director, Mr. LeGrand, about this, is that different communities need more radical updates than other ones. In fact, sometimes in some areas, there's not a lot that's changed in a 10-year period. So the mandate, he was saying, maybe it isn't as expensive a process on all of them. You really spend that $2 to $3 million when it's, and I know the EIR costs the significant portion of that, but sometimes when people say, look, things are going great in Granada Hills, the zoning still reflects what we want, there might be a tweak here or there, we might have an adjustment of what those numbers are. He had suggested perhaps some of them wouldn't need that 10-year update, but I think even those communities where there's little change still deserve the chance to kind of comment in and to have some predictability on what's happening in their community as well, though I absolutely respect his comments on where that was coming from. So what I'd ask, and this is just going to be communication from the chair at this point, because I know Ms. Hahn understandably had to leave as we almost enter the fourth hour, or we end the fourth hour and enter the fifth of this meeting. I would ask the CLA and CAO to move this forward to council, but to suggest, and I will work with them. I mean, one of the suggestions is a piece of something that's tied to real estate, that there be, a small percentage of growth of property tax or documentary transfer tax be attached to giving the planning department the resources it needs. Now, I know that becomes a citywide budget fight, but I'm tired of 10 years of planning department not getting some of those resources that it needs, and I think the community will really support this because this is something that folks in Los Angeles feel pretty powerless about. They feel like planning happens all around them without their involvement, and I think they'd be happy to support something that really obligates us to do this and will help the planning department get those resources that it needs to from existing funds. So obviously a new tax wouldn't pass on this. It would probably be a little bit too esoteric, but I'd like the CLA and CAO to work with my office and Mr. Reyes' office between now and moving this forward to council to maybe come up with a couple different options of how we might be able to fund this based on those estimates we have here today from the planning department. Okay? Without objection? So ordered. Thank you. And, and my God, we have a card on this.
Yes, we do.
Noel Weiss, come on forward.
Yeah, really. This is important. You heard today from the Chamber of Commerce. Big deal. They didn't talk about specifically. They talked generically. The need for certainty. You want business in LA, you need certainty. How are you going to make that happen? Nobody can plan a business without knowing communities. What is the policy of the city on housing, Mr. Garcetti? What is the policy of the city on transportation? What is the policy of the city on infrastructure? It doesn't exist. If you forced the planning department through the charter, and actually force the council through the charter, then you would be in a situation where you at least have an outline, an abstract. Not only that, you'd have a conversation. You can be able to begin to unite the city around common values. It just doesn't happen, in part, again, respectfully, because each council person is their own king and queen of their own districts, and you know what? They don't want to cede power. It's understandable, but the community plans with the community input would enable that to occur. As far as funding goes, I think there is a guaranteed source, and this is a specific and important exception, and you can put in the charter without necessarily saying an amount. You can or a minimum amount. You could say that council shall appropriate a sufficient amount equal to X dollars that would fulfill this function, and I think at that point, then obviously you got to hold planning accountable, but you also have to hold yourselves accountable, make sure that this is done, and then hopefully be able to track what is done with these community plans with a policy determination on all of these key, and then once you get that, then the business community can feel, hey, you know what? Not a problem. The bureaucrats can feel, now we've got the certainty, now we know what the council's policy is, we can feel comfortable making these decisions, and I think everything else will begin to fall into place. This is really, really important, which is why I stayed to make this comment. We need this on the ballot. We need the guaranteed funding. I think Michael Grandi will do a great job. Hopefully you'll be able to give him the tools to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your support of it as well, Noel. That will close public comment, and we'll move that forward as a communication from the chair. And this beast of a rules and elections meeting is now adjourned. Thank you all.